right now. I'm going to take roll. Is Mr. Hui here?
Here.
Mr. Hoover?
Here.
Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed? We got a missing one. We'll move on. I think he's probably just trying to log in. Mr. Clark?
I was muted. I'm here.
Okay. We got Mr. Clark?
Here.
Yeah, we got Ms. Short here. We got everybody here.
And don't forget about Miss Gallant.
Oh, yeah. Ali, are you there?
Here.
Okay, I don't see you on the picture there. Okay, thank you. We'll move into the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Hui, can you take the honors for us?
Absolutely, just unmuting. All right, you will join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Hui. Okay. I'm going to go into a broadcast and recording is being made at the direction of the board, and the broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Newsom's issued Executive Order N-2920, which temporarily suspends provisions of the Brown Act relating to public meetings. As such, Folsom Cordova Unified School District board members will be conducting open session board meetings via Zoom, video teleconferencing. The meetings will also be live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. The public's health and well-being are the top priority for the Board of Trustees of Folsom Cordova Unified School District, and you are urged to take all appropriate health and safety precautions. Public comments encouraged and can be done in writing or during the virtual board meeting using the raised hand feature. Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board Policy 1313 promotes mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among employees, parents, and the public. We will treat staff, parents, and members of the public with respect and expect the same in return. If any member of the public uses obscenities or communicates in a demanding, loud, insulting, and/or demeaning manner, the board will calmly and politely admonish the persons to communicate civilly. Speakers will wish to make public comment to the board in Spanish or Russian will have their comments translated to English. Written comments were accepted until 3 p.m. today. These comments were emailed to the board prior to the board meeting for review and will not be read out loud during the meeting. At the direction of the board, the superintendent will call roll and acknowledge the received all electronic comments submitted by 3 p.m. today as it pertains to today's board meeting. Superintendent, please call the roll on that.
Mr. Short?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Hoover?
Here.
Mr. Hui?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
And Ms. Gallant?
Here.
Thank you.
Great. With that said, before we go to adoption agenda, I want to have reports out of closed session. Superintendent?
No action to report out.
Okay, thank you. Moving to adopting agenda, I have a motion.
Move it.
Got Mr. Clark, a second.
Second.
Superintendent, can you do a roll call?
Mr. Short?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Hui?
Aye.
Ms. Gallant?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our discussion action number 6. We're going to start off with item A, legal resource or recourse, CSV advocacy for challenging the changes to the CDBH guidance. Superintendent?
Yes, thank you. At our last meeting, the board directed staff to come back with any research or information on any kind of advocacy efforts, either legal or through our agencies such as CSVA or AXA we can pursue with some of the changing guidance that could slow down the reopening of schools or keeping schools open. So to that end, we have invited legal counsel to join us, and also Dennis Meyer, the Assistant Executive Director of CSVA Governmental Relations, is also here to join us to talk about the advocacy and also probably the timing of where we're at at the Capitol with where the guidance is between the governor and legislature right now. So, Kim Bogart, do we have you in the room here to start on the legal side? Okay, I don't see Kim, so maybe we can start with Mr. Meyer. Welcome, Dennis. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're so welcome, Dr. Klegan. Thank you for the invitation. Interesting topic. This is consuming, I know, all of your thoughts locally and probably all of the people who are watching tonight too. And it's obviously consuming our efforts with everything we're doing at CSBA. And Dr. Klegan, you mentioned AXA too. So what we're doing on this issue, it's hand in hand with on a lot of the issues with what we call the Education Coalition, which includes labor and management and PTA. But on some of these real critical issues on reopening, we've been working very closely with the management groups. So it includes AXA. The things that we're doing now that and it's not just now. I mean, this has been all consuming for us as it has been for you locally since March. When, who thought we'd be doing this now as we approach, March a year later. But right now, there's just an intense effort to reopen and keep open schools safely. And so when we're talking with school districts around the state, some of them have not been open. Folsom, Cordova is different. So as we're talking with legislators and the governor, that's what we're trying to do is make them understand that decisions that they make, programs they put in place, proposals that they're making need to recognize a couple of things. Number one is many districts have already opened and have been open for months. And so just to make sure that they're not making decisions that cause closure. And I know that's been a concern of your district. Dr. Klegan, I saw your letter today to the governor with all the CCs on it, really making these same points that we've been making. And right now the issues are, there's the vaccine. I mean, I wish that we could produce 300 million vaccinations next week. And as we know, that's not happening. So now we're trying to figure out how to ration those vaccinations. We have been advocating at the state level about vaccinations to make sure that school employees are a top priority. And they are. So that's exciting. But the problem now is we still don't have enough vaccinations. There is conversation around the Capitol of, well, why not just require everyone to be vaccinated before schools open? And, we push back with, as I think Governor Newsom has recently, that we think that schools can be reopened safely in lower grade levels with, sufficient social distancing, sufficient cleaning, sufficient, personal protective equipment, things like that, that we could get schools reopened. So anytime there's a change in a rule, let's say a change in social distancing rules, and we know that the Department of Public Health has recently done that, it causes those who are planning to reopen to have to go back in and try to figure that out. And the same if you're already open or we're open during the fall, closed during the January surge and are ready to reopen now. And then these new requirements come out. So we keep trying to tell the state that stuff has to be advisory. Let the districts work this stuff out themselves and talk with their communities, with their parents, with their stakeholders, with their employees to figure these things out. Because anything that looks like a state mandate is going to end up causing delay. And by delay, probably not by days, but by months and months. And so that's our concern. And I think we share that with what I have heard and read about your district and then saw in the communications that you're making. all we can ask is that, your school community. So I work for the California School Boards Association. So we serve the school board here. And we obviously work with what we call the governance team, which includes the superintendent and staff. Is we just urge to do what you're doing, and that's talking to your legislators about these very issues. Because the things that we hear are being discussed in the Capitol building, we actually think could lead to schools not reopening swiftly, and could delay, or even could, as we've heard Governor Newsom say, delay this whole year and push reopening as a fall conversation, not a February or March conversation. And so that's our concern too. And so that's our, this is what we're telling school board members and superintendents around the state is keep talking to the decision makers, because sometimes they're in a vacuum and not really aware of what you have to do to get schools open or to stay open. And so we just have to make sure that we communicate that message. I don't know if the board or if you, Dr. Clegan, have any questions, but it's a partnership, and we have our nose to the grindstone and are working feverishly to get the right resources in place and to protect your governing authority to make sure that you can have the resources you need to reopen and to stay open. And that's our bottom line. But any more requirements put on us is going to do nothing to get you moving swiftly. It's actually going to cause delays, and that's our major message right now.
Thank you. Is there any board questions of Dennis? Well, Dennis is here. I really appreciate you being here because you're a great resource and all the years you've been for CSBA. So open this up to the board. You just raise your hand, or
Mr. President?
Yeah, Mr. Reed, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if we should hear from Kim Bogard first, because some of the questions might go between Mr. Myers and Ms. Bogard.
Okay, Superintendent, is Kim available?
I am here, so
Welcome, Ms. Bogard.
Hello. So on the issue of on this issue, I guess my question is what questions do you have about the ability? I mean, are you asking what the different mechanisms are in order to move forward on a legal front, as opposed to doing what Mr. Myers is talking about, which is talking with legislators and agencies? I guess I want to make sure I'm answering the right questions for you.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Mr. Reed, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, and this, I guess, kind of goes to both Mr. Meyer and Ms. Bogard. As I think Mr. Myers indicated, no one thought, when we left on March 13th last year, that we would be currently in this situation where our secondary schools have yet to return, even in a hybrid fashion. Even despite the fact of spending upwards of $7 million on the improvements to be able to accommodate students and teachers in a safe manner in a hybrid fashion. And I know the numbers are headed in the right direction. I'm very happy to see both the case rate and the positivity rate all heading in the right direction. That's very encouraging. But it just seems like all we've seen since July is constant change in guidelines. One after another, and at this juncture, I just don't feel like we should leave any stone unturned. That we should be looking at multiple strategies for figuring out how to get schools back into hybrid. So that if one fails, at least we have another strategy that we've already started to deploy, rather than having to start from scratch on another strategy. So I had asked for this to be on the topic tonight at the last board meeting, and part of it is just pure frustration, because we're in purple. El Dorado County and Placer County are in purple. The difference between we're not in school, they are. The numbers are the same for both for all three counties. But the difference is that, except for 3.5 weeks at the end of October, early November, Sacramento County has been in the purple the entire time. Whereas Placer and El Dorado County, for about 3.5 months, they were in orange and red, which gave them more opportunity to get schools open pursuant to these arbitrary guidelines that were put out. But I still ask people, medical professionals, anybody, please tell me the difference of why, if you live in El Dorado County and Placer County in purple, that they can safely attend school while we cannot in purple. It's not a scientific thing, it's a political thing. And, how we can figure out how to get, our students being treated equitably and with the students in El Dorado County and Placer County, is a great desire of mine. So that's essentially why I asked to hear both from CSBA as well as our legal counsel as to what opportunities there are for to pursue a hybrid reopening. And so we heard from Mr. Meyer, obviously indicating that CSBA is working diligently. I guess one question for Mr. Meyer would be, are there other districts in the state or other districts in the region that are considering legal action against the governor or the Department of Public Health? And then I guess my question to Ms. Myers is there any standing? Is there any basis, legal basis that you would see as an argument for the disparity that exists between Folsom, Cordova, and in a school district that's literally a stone's throw from our borders?
Sure. Mr. Myers, you want to speak to other school districts first?
Right. So in our conversations locally and then also statewide, because we have a lot of conversations through our local staff, I don't know of any who are talking about pursuing legal action. I'm going to say a lot are in the exact same boat you're in. Same issues, different sizes, suburban and urban and rural, all kind of in the same circumstances, but no one has come to us as far as I know. I can research that and get back to you. But even our legal team, when they knew I was speaking tonight, didn't offer up anything. It was kind of maybe one of the first ones we've heard. So
yeah,
right now, no.
I would tend to agree that I haven't seen cases come out. We're watching this. What we are seeing, one of the cases, and you may be familiar with it, is that San Francisco City is turning around and suing the school district for failing to open. And so you might see more folks or more cases following that line. The other case out there, and remember that we're in Sacramento County and will, I think, get a different result initially. Sutter County took a run at some of the legal authorities related to voting, right? So same vein of issues, not exactly on topic, but same vein. And it is headed to the Court of Appeals. And so we will have some information about how strong, the arguments are. So we're seeing other lawyers take those issues up, and I'll be curious to see how that stands up at the Third Court of Appeal. But to answer your question, there are avenues in which to challenge. You hit the nail on the head with regard to the word arbitrary. So if the board or a group of school districts were to take on the issue, you would be filing a writ against most likely CDPH, California Department of Health. And you would be looking to make a finding that the rules that they have put in place, whether it's an executive order or whether we're looking at CDPH, that those are arbitrary and capricious, that they lack the evidentiary support. You're talking about science. They're contrary to public policy, et cetera. So that's kind of the main vein that you would come down in order to challenge an issue like that.
Mr. President. Or, well, Kim, if I could just...
go ahead. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay, that's okay. Kim, I guess just more directly, do you see any legal issues with the fact that a school can be open in the purple tier, but not reopen in the purple tier? I think that is really kind of the crux of everything, right? Is that the state has chosen to say that schools can operate safely on the one hand if they were already open, but arbitrarily say that they cannot operate safely if they were not. So right. I guess that's like, do you have a legal assessment of that from equal protection?
I think I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a hard lift, right, to come forward on a writ of mandate to challenge in an area where we're going to look at arbitrary and capricious, or where we're going to end up in a place where we have, an abuse of power. And those are probably one of the two standards we'll be stuck with. And I think that in doing that, those are fairly low standards for the state to meet. Unlike some of the, when you look at some of the federal issues where we're looking at freedom of religion and other protected classes, it is, that's a higher bar for the government to come in and meet. So my concern is that the bar is low enough that the challenge is, I will call it a heavy lift.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it may be a reason you're not seeing mega districts like LA Unified and San Diego taking these issues on already.
Okay. Any other board questions? Hearing none. Superintendent.
President Short, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is for Mr. Meyer, and I'm not sure if you have information on this or not, but I'm wondering, do you know if secondary schools in California that have opened, what has that been like for them? What kind of results have they seen in terms of health of the community and the school?
When I try to answer that question myself, I go to the Department of Public Health, so CDPH has a hub. And some of the research that they used is there that shows that, when schools have reopened and the key things are in place with cleaning and social distancing and small cohorts or early grades, things like that, that the transmission rates at school are very, very low. That when there is, quote unquote, an outbreak or a case identified, it's usually from sort of an off-school activity, something happened in the family, there was a family gathering or something like that. And so it's things like that we see, but I believe you can find that at, here we're talking about CDPH, but, the Reopening Schools Hub that they run has some of that information there. And it's actually fairly convincing. It's what we rely on to say, you don't need to require our staff to all be vaccinated before you reopen, because here's research that's done in various states and school districts here in California that show that, we can reopen safely. So some of that's there. I can't tell you other than the hub, I can't give you specific examples though.
Okay. Any board staff questions? Any questions from the board? Hearing none, this is a discussion action item. So before I move on, I want to go to public comment. I'm hearing no more questions from the board. So do we have any hands raised?
Yes, Mr. Short. Would you mind announcing the time limitation so the public is aware?
Yes, I'd like to limit it to public comment to 40 minutes and 2 minutes apiece. So we can go from there. How many hands do we have up at this point?
Currently, we have 3, and I can start when you're ready.
We go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay. The first one is Tony.
Hey, Tony, are you there?
Hi, good evening. Tony Ruiz, Vista del Lago. First of all, I'm not really interested in what certain people have to say because what they have to say is clearly political. Let's talk about the schools that have already opened, the districts that have already, quote unquote, opened while in the purple tier. Let's talk about Roseville. Let's talk about what's happened to them, and how many of them have had to go out on full distance learning after reopening in hybrid prematurely. Everybody wants to go back. I don't know how many times I have to say this before people believe it. Teachers want to go back. We want to go back safely. And people seem to keep rolling their eyes and going, oh, teachers just don't want to go back. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of being nice. I had COVID. I almost died of COVID. Maybe people don't understand what that's like for a family, for people who don't understand what that feels like. We want to go back. We have vaccinations. Let's get the vaccinations in place. And then let's go back. I will be first in line. I will be first in line. I will be leading a cheer patrol to go back when there are vaccinations for everybody. I am in a position where I don't even have to worry about it because I have antibodies. I got so sick that I will probably have antibodies for 6 months, but not everybody is like me. We have a new variation of this virus that is becoming more infectious and more deadly. And anybody who says differently, I'm sorry, you just don't know what you're talking about, so please sit down. We need to do this safely. Let's look out for the interests of everybody and not just the students. Teachers and students matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Next, we have screen name iPad.
Go right ahead, iPad.
Hi, this is Claudia Mickelson, calling with a question to the legal team about these special needs students. You talked a little bit about equitable treatment with Placer and El Dorado Hills going to school. And also you talked about equal protection and state versus federal issues. And I do know that on a federal level, disabled people, there is an American with Disabilities Act. And the governor did approve many months ago for special education to go back in small cohorts. My grandson has not been in school for 334 days, and he is a special needs, severely autistic child. And his class was canceled according to the school district for lack of staffing, which seems to me to have nothing to do with vaccines or any of the other issues that are being raised. So what I want to know is, what are the legalities of keeping a special needs child out of class because of lack of staffing? That does not seem to fall under the red tier or the purple tier or any of those issues, or what other school districts are doing. So I would like the legal people to address that, and why a small cohort for him and children like him cannot be established as was promised in October of 2020. Thank you.
Next, we have Debbie.
Debbie, you there?
Hi, board. This is Debbie Krikorian, FCEA. I wanted to talk to you a few things. I feel like every time we start making progress about opening, we're going backwards because we're spending so much time trying to figure out how to find information about loopholes to go into instead of actually just addressing the safety of the schools. We have vaccinations that are out there shortly that we'll have for our employees so that we can come back. We need to get safety inspections for our air quality. We haven't even addressed that in secondary. We have childcare issues that haven't been addressed as well because other Sacramento schools are not open. We are out there alone and our employees don't have childcare. We have a lot of issues that we need to deal with that we could deal with very easily at a bargaining table with our district if there weren't so many interruptions of things that keep pushing us backwards. Teachers want to be in school. Teachers are wanting to be in there safe. We're trying to get there safely. We've asked for third-party inspections. I keep hearing over and over again, our schools are safer than others, but I haven't seen the proof. And the proof that I have seen of pictures of ventilation systems is not steam clean, but brushed, and not to the degree. 85% of our air quality, according to UC Davis, is not good for kids. So all we're asking for is safety measures. Give us those safety measures. We're coming back. But to keep going around in circles and deflect things, it keeps us going backwards. We want to work together. We have the collaborative relationship, and I feel it keeps being torn away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Next.
Next, we have Jen.
Jen, you there?
Yes, good evening. I'm a teacher and a parent in this district with concerns regarding unethical comments made by board members. Even with the extreme amounts of exhaustion, added responsibilities, the change in venue for teaching, and the daily thoughts of leaving the profession, nothing has shocked me more than the appalling comments made by board members at the board meeting on February 4th, 2021. During that meeting, board members made the following unethical and immoral comments, and I quote, "I just want to add on to this, which of the guidelines or gray areas that we should take the opportunity to interpret the way we want to interpret them. I would not want to be the motion on the permission of the CDPH. I think consulting with them is fine, and we can ask them, but the reality is that the guidelines are so if it's not there, it's not against the rules. Also, and I quote, would it stand to reason that the more people that don't have symptoms or that are healthy that go and test, the lower our case rate would be? I'm aghast that the board would allow this behavior. This is not what we teach our students, and it is not what should be modeled by the board. This behavior is dishonest, disrespectful, and a slap in the face to the other group of stakeholders that get overlooked time and time again, your teachers. Although it really is not surprising, as we are not mentioned once in the FCUSD mission or vision statements, students, staff, families, businesses, community partnerships, and schools are mentioned, but not the teachers. Why is that? Why would teachers not be included in our district's mission and vision statements? In your own governance handbook, it is stated that the board will operate openly with trust and integrity, conduct district business in a fair, respectful, and responsible manner. I hope when the board does their evaluations that they keep this in the back of their minds and they begin to lead with honesty, integrity, morals, and the character that we demand from our students, faculty, and staff. Thank you.
Christina Cook, and I love this woman.
Thank you. Next.
Next we have Corinne.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, I just want to say thank you to her for who she just spoke. I think every single teacher feels exactly the same way she does. We were so disrespected in the last meeting and so infuriated at the lack of ethics that the board showed in those comments and those lines of thinking. I would also like to follow up on saying that opening in this district does not seem to be about what the stakeholders really want or need, but about a political position or a political decision. It does not seem to be based in realities. We cannot open in a rushed and poorly planned fashion to have the right political perspective. And we cannot afford to have things be as inconsistent and rocky as it has been in the last year. We do not have vaccines for teachers who need it to stay safe. Not all necessarily, but those who need it. The camera setups to run hybrid are not done. Decisions like the 6th grade conversation last meeting, without considering the logistics of what that would really mean. Denying doctor's notes, despite doctors saying that those teachers are in high risk categories and at higher risk for contracting COVID. No clear plans for quarantines, etc. We cannot simply push ahead because it seems politically correct or the political decision to make. We need to do it in a way that is not going to continue to throw staff, students, and families in a turmoil roller coaster ride where we never know what is going to happen and we constantly feel like the sand is sinking beneath our feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next we have Katie.
Hi, good evening. It's actually Bobby Collins. I work over at Mitchell Middle School. And I'd really just like to know what the plan is to address the fact that the information that is currently available on the district website is not in compliance with the state is requiring them. The district website is misinformation and is out of date as it relates to COVID-19 guidance. Other information is completely missing altogether. For example, on the first page of the COVID-19 school guidance checklist, it's incomplete and does not state accurate information about the current tier or the person ultimately responsible for the district's LEA decisions. We don't need to get into every single inaccuracy of the documentation provided, but before educators should be required to come back to in-person instruction, the district should at least be forced to provide accurate information, and it is up to date. Thank you.
Mr. Short, just a reminder, comments need to be related to the topic of discussion right now.
I noticed we diverged a little bit because our next item B might be some appropriate. So whoever's raising your hands, please stick to item 6A.
Next, we have Christopher.
Yeah, good evening. So I'm hearing a lot of comments about other schools reopening and maybe too soon. It doesn't seem that we have enough data that it is, in fact, too soon. These other schools, either private or in other districts, seem to be doing just fine. And I'm not asking for the educators to come back, but if I need to, I'll go back and teach in person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just going to remind you, we're talking about the legal recourse CSB advocacy for challenging changes to the CDBHE guidance. Here was our discussion. Is there any more hands that would be relevant to this? Please continue.
Okay. Next, we have iPhone, screen name iPhone.
Hi, this is Jennifer Geyer.
Hi, Jennifer. Before you proceed, is this regarding the agenda item we're currently on?
Yeah, I was listening to the two speakers and I wanted to kind of comment.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Sure. I mean, I would love to address the other things, but I'll stay on topic. I actually was concerned with, I think it was Dennis Myers that was on there. And I know he says he's been concerned with this since March. And I'm kind of confused on if someone at his level hasn't been able to get this done and talk to legislators himself, which he sounds like he'd be the key person to talk to them on behalf of schools in all of California. And so if he's having a tough time doing it in March, we're at a point where our district has to make some tough decisions. And I think the legal recourse is a fantastic idea. I think it's going to help us be more equitable in our district to all the surrounding districts around us. They've shown in all those other districts that it's possible to do it. And if they use legal recourse or if they talk to the California Department of Public Health, they're able to stay open 5 days a week or whatever their district plans. And I think Mr. Reed's option of going a legal route isn't a bad idea. I don't know how long that would take, but I would love to look into that because it sounds like from what Dennis is saying that if we don't do something, these legislators, including the governor and everybody else working on this, is just going to stop us every inch of the way. We're still thinking about spring. Our eyes are on spring, and the governor is already talking about the fall. So I think Mr. Reed's idea to at least look into the legal ramifications, how long it'll take, and if we can get it done in a timely manner and put some pressure on them to loosen up that purple tier restriction for schools like ours, that all around us, it's completely inequitable for our children to be left behind. Everybody else I know is in private school. So you're really showing the equity gap in a whole series of different ways, from low income to wealthy individuals. Like you're really hurting the public school kids a lot. Rancho Cordova, Folsom, and the legal option may be our only chance at putting some pressure on them to let us make our own decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we have Tyler. Hi, Tyler. Is your comments regarding the current agenda item?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I'm wondering what the district is hoping to gain from this. So suing the state of California and the California Department of Public Health to change the Department of Public Health guidelines. Like, what outcome are we looking for when we have a lesson with their students. And as a teacher, I know what the end goal is I want for my students to learn from a lesson. So I'm wondering, what is the outcome? Because I haven't heard it. If we're suing to make a political cause, we have members on the board that work in the state assembly and have a political mission. If we're doing that, like, there is a political route. We have elections, and we can voice our opinion. We have advocacy that we're talking about. But suing the state of California, and as our own legal representation noted, going it alone, I'm wondering what it is that we're hoping to gain from this. We're going to open schools in a purple tier with widespread outbreak. I understand the science is changing, and that's really frustrating. As someone who has a science credential to teach science, it is challenging for non-science minded people to understand that this is a new virus. It's called a novel virus because it's new. And a year ago, we didn't understand anything about it. And so that public health guidelines are changing as we go can be frustrating. And I'm sure it's frustrating for the board members. It's frustrating for teachers. Now we're supposed to wear 2 masks. So it's really challenging when this is constantly changing. But suing the Department of Public Health, I guarantee you that the public health guidelines are going to change before this lawsuit goes again. And maybe it'll open schools, and maybe it'll require the distance be 8 feet apart. Like, the science is constantly changing here. So I'm wondering, what is the outcome? If we're just looking to open schools, well, then that's the next agenda item. But if we're looking to sue the state of California to make a political point, then just own up to that and acknowledge that. But what is the outcome we hope to get from this lawsuit going it alone?
Thank you. Next.
There's no more hands, Mr. Short.
Okay, with that said, we'll bring it back to final board comments and direction on 6A for the CSB advocacy. Who spoke? I can't see anybody.
It's Josh.
Oh, Josh. Okay, Josh. Mr. Hoover, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, just to respond to some of the comments tonight. First of all, thank you, Dennis and Kim, for being here. I think your assessments were helpful. And I think it's important. I mean, I'll let David speak. You know, I know that he wanted this on the agenda, and I supported that. So I'm not going to speak for the merits of this necessarily, but I think the goal tonight was to explore what our options are. This is, you know, the whole point of this discussion is to explore every single possible avenue to get our kids back to the classroom as soon as possible. And, you know, for those on the call tonight that are claiming this is politically motivated or claiming that the science does not support a return to the classroom are simply inaccurate. The CDC, which, by the way, has been very consistent over the last few months, but all of their most recent studies state not only that kids need to be back in the classroom, not only that kids should be back in the classroom and that it can be done safely, but their latest studies actually show that the classroom is safer than the community at large. There is no more debate when it comes to the science. The science says schools can be open safely, and that is what this board is choosing to pursue. I didn't hear a single study cited that schools are not safe. I did not hear a single shred of evidence or data supporting that schools are not safe from those who do not support the reopening of schools. And so I would suggest that if you want to come in and claim that this is politically motivated or that this is somehow motivated by something other than the very best for our students, I would suggest that you bring some data that backs up your point of view, that backs up that things are not safe, because all of the mainstream data and all of the science points in the opposite direction. That being said, I think I was very pleased yesterday that the California Department of Public Health did come out with a new potential option that we can pursue to get our secondary kids back to the classroom. I know we're going to go into that more in the next discussion agenda item. But I think at this point in time, we should probably work through that process before exploring any sort of legal action further. I think that would be where I am at tonight. I do think that Ms. Bogard's assessment of the legal standard is correct, that this would be a difficult legal standard to really bring forward and be successful. And so we need to take that into account. But we also need to, I think, try to work with CDPH and their new system that they've put in place to get approval from them to reopen our secondary schools. That seems to be a pretty quick process and a short timeline. Let's go through that process first. If that is unsuccessful, then maybe we can readdress this at a future meeting. So I would suggest we put a hold on this for tonight and not move forward with any sort of legal action at this point, but would love to hear what my colleagues think as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover.
Mr. President?
Go ahead, Mr. Reed.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of this on the agenda is not to start legal action. If you look at the recommended motion, it's either, and it doesn't say we're going to pursue legal action and file a case tomorrow. It doesn't say, it's giving staff the direction to, if you will, explore more. We needed to get this on the agenda so that we had an opportunity to talk about this. It was never, I guess, appropriately agendized before to be able to have this conversation. So I'm very comfortable with the staff's recommended motion, which just merely says to the staff that you have the board's direction to explore further conversations with our legal counsel about the pros and cons of bringing a suit. It also tells our staff that they have the green light to continue to have collaborative discussions with CSBA to see how FCUSD might be of assistance at a regional or a state level. Obviously we're located in Sacramento, so we have some additional benefits that perhaps some other districts don't, just because of our geographic location. So it's a fairly benign motion here to give staff the ability to go ahead and continue to explore. If the staff decides that we should enter into some type of coalition effort legislatively, they can come back on a future agenda item and make that final recommendation to the board. If the same way with legal action, if they come back and say, I think we have a great legal argument to make here, they can come back and make that recommendation to the board. So this is just merely a step in the direction of giving guidance to our staff to go explore various options and report back to the board with recommendations on what those options, what the staff recommends those options be. So I'm very comfortable with this motion, but those are my comments right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Clark?
No, I just echo what Mr. Reed is saying. I think options are always good to see what staff and our legal team can come up with as far as what we can do. However, thinking about it moving forward, that, if we do pursue a legal recourse, it's going to take a while, and those numbers and everything are changing so fast. It's like by the time we get things pushed through or get the proper paperwork and file and do all that stuff, I mean, things have changed. We may be back in red by then. But I do agree with Mr. Reed. Maybe we look at some options, what we can do, what other districts are doing, and just kind of get an idea. I know that Dennis, we've met a couple of weeks ago in the delegate assembly, and we talked a little bit about this. So I appreciate you coming in actually to our meeting and giving your input on it. And Kim, always thank you for being here for us. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Louie?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with David, though. I'm not sure we actually need to make it a motion. I would hope the staff is continually looking at what options we have and bringing them to the table when they do discover something that makes sense. So, I mean, if we want to motion for them to continue to do so, I'm happy to agree with that, but also assume that that's already what is happening.
Okay, thank you. Allie there?
I'm here, just real quick. Yeah, I would say I agree that the waiver process should be looked at first and then the legal recourse next.
Okay, thank you. For my president's final comments, I appreciate the board deliberating on this, and I want to thank Dennis and Kim also giving our feedback on it. Hearing from everybody here, if we did go to sue the governor or CDHP, it's the big lift is what we're here, and pretty much what we're saying, it turned out to be a moot point because last I checked, the governor's office has like 200 attorneys and a huge budget. It'd be very costly for the district to do something like that. And I get it that we want to look at all options and everything, but I think that would, what I'm hearing here is that we need to focus on our circle of influence, what we can do here right now with the new guidelines, and let's focus on the things that we can do to get back to school. So I kind of agree with the board here, and what I'm hearing consensus is that with also Dennis here, checking with AXA and everybody else that's out there, there looks like there's a lot of motion out there, a lot of letters that was sent to the board this week on the same type of advocacy and things that other districts are doing, along with CSBA, working with all the legislators. But I think it's really important if the board does get into advocacy, calling our legislators and working, and that's one of the things board members can do. And also make sure that our legislators will make the right decisions, not create what we're seeing here is, 5 different directions, 5 different ways and things happening, that it makes it more difficult for districts to open up or just stay open. So I think that we could do, I don't think we have a motion yet here. I think it's just more of, do we want to proceed with CSBA's involvement? Do we want the board to do it? It is an action item, so we have to have something to give direction to the staff here. So do I have anybody that wants to on the board kind of clarify? Because I've heard Mr. Hoover say, yeah, I think we could table this and then move on to our waiver process. That's one motion I believe I heard.
Yeah, I think the motion is pretty benign, as David said, so I'd defer to him if he wants to make a motion.
Okay, David. So
I'd make the motion that's in the agenda. So I'll make that motion.
And can you clarify for the board the motion?
The recommended motion is the Board of Education recommends pursuing either legal recourse or a collaborative effort with CSBA to challenge the current CDPH guidance.
Okay, so let me clarify a portion that we would pursue legal action against CDHP.
I guess the operative word is or. Obviously, as I said before, personally, I don't think we're going to get to the point of a lawsuit. It's just giving our staff direction to explore multiple options. And I think Mr. Hoover is probably right that based on the new guidance that came out just last night, that's probably the most logical direction that we're going to be heading. I just want to make sure that our staff have every single possible tool in their tool belt at their disposal. And I feel that this motion just gives them that ability to move forward with board direction to pursue anything that's possible. And I do think that perhaps the most logical one will be what we're going to talk about on the next agenda item.
Is that? Go ahead, Mr. I just want, it just seemed a little confusing, the motion. I just want to have clear motion here for either.
Well, I'm just reading the recommended staff motion that's in the agenda.
Okay.
We could edit it if you'd like.
Yeah, that's possible. Well, Mr. Hoover, you wanted to, talk.
I was just going to say, I think the recommended motion gives staff flexibility. We're not telling them to pursue legal action right at this time. So, and in particular, I think it's good to continue to encourage a collaborative effort with CSBA because, any advocacy that we can do is good. So on this front, so I'd second the recommended motion that David made. I'd be comfortable with that. I don't think it's requiring staff to do anything at this point.
Okay. We got a first and a second, and basically giving just broad base to move out any options. It sounds like the CSB advocacy is going to be the one that we're going to be pursuing mostly. Okay. Roll call, Superintendent.
Yes, who was the second on the vote? I'm sorry.
Mr. Hoover was.
Hoover, okay, Thank
And
you.
Superintendent, can you clarify what you understand what the motion is for staff direction?
Yeah, and what I understood, it's one or the other, and giving us options to pursue. And as was said, looking at our next topic on the agenda would be our priority of where we focus our time right now. But I would definitely encourage our board to reach out to our legislators. I made calls, I sent letters, and I'm happy to share those contacts with all of you if you'd like to do the same, along with some talking points. AXA and CSBA do that alongside together, and if you have the time, this is the time to do it. So I can send that to you tomorrow.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, so roll call vote. Mr. Short.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Hoover.
Aye.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Mr. Hui.
Aye.
Ms. Gallant.
Aye.
Motion carries. 5-0.
Thank you, Superintendent. Moving on to item 6B, secondary reopening, updates and status of 6th grade returning while in purple tier. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Short. And we have a presentation, and I'd like Ms. Goldsmith to go ahead and put that up. At our last board meeting, we were asked to explore the January 14th CDPH guidance that came out that is really gave options for elementary schools to come back while in the purple tier once the case rate in a county reaches less than 25 cases per 100,000. We have been open with our elementary schools. I'm very proud of our elementary schools and our teachers and our staff that have been back in our hybrid AM/PM model since November. So as we have all said, we want to safely bring back the rest of our students and staff too. And it looks like with the changing CDPH guidance, there was that flexibility for elementaries that had not opened yet throughout the state to do so. As was mentioned with the last agenda item, last night CDPH added a couple of more criteria, a petition process to help expedite that. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation, but it really is addressing those districts that are already partially open and giving them the ability to open other grade levels if they follow the new CDPH guidance and work alongside collaboratively with their local health department. So some of that information is not reflected in our slides, but we'll get to it at the end of this presentation. So I wanted to preface it with that. And let's go to the next slide, please, Ms. Goldsmith. The topics that we're addressing, we want to just make sure we're all on the same page, have the latest information on our health metrics and vaccination updates, our COVID safety plan updates for our middle schools and high schools. As we mentioned at the last meeting, we posted all the COVID safety plans for our elementary school to our elementary sites by February 1st. We'll talk about the facilities updates and all the safety mitigation that we have in place. We'll hear a little bit about our general ed, special ed schedules and the secondary hybrid AD model, secondary staffing updates, and I'll wrap it up with timeline. So with that, we have a team of presenters, and I also want to acknowledge and recognize and thank Dr. Olivia Kasiri, our Executive Director of Sac County Public Health, whom I invited to be with us this evening. I want to thank her for her partnership these last several months. We're not medical doctors, and I couldn't do it without her support and her team's support. So thank you to Dr. Kasiri. I know you're somewhere out there in our virtual crowd, and she's also here to answer any questions. We'll also be joined by Carrie Kay, Jennifer Sarin, Matt Washburn, Dr. Huber, Dawn Ogden, and Betty Jo Wessinger. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into our first slide. Ms. Kay.
Hi, good evening, and thank you, board members, thank you, families, thank you, teachers, and other staff members who are out there with us tonight. And thank you also to Dr. Kasiri. My slide this week is very similar to the one from last week, but we do have good news in that the numbers are moving in the right direction, and that's exciting. Like we talked about last week, in order to move from the purple tier down to the red tier, Sacramento County does need to have a case rate of 7 per 100,000 and a positivity of less than 8% for 2 consecutive weeks. And remember, we need to look at the CDPH data, not just this Sacramento County public health data. And so the CDPH data was updated on the 9th, on Tuesday of this week. And with that data, we are at a case rate of 24.8 per 100,000 and a positivity rate of 7.5%. And then, like we talked about last week, the way we can use the Sacramento County public health data, their epidemiological information, is consider it like a windshield, a forecast of what's going to be coming. And so if we looked at the Sacramento County public health data from this week, also updated on Tuesday, that reflects a case rate of 17.6 per 100,000 and a positivity rate of 7.2. So in both of those cases, like I said, the numbers are trending down. We are getting closer to the metrics that we want to see, and that's very encouraging news. And the other bit of information, last week I didn't have a bullet point on vaccines, but this week I did add one, and it's been a big week. I'm pleased to say that last Sunday, a small group, myself, another nurse, and my administrative assistant, had the opportunity to go down to Jesuit High School and observe their mass vaccination setup and how Dr. Rusty Yoshida has made that system run really well. It was a phenomenal learning opportunity to be able to see something like that in person and make some great connections across the public health venues of Sacramento County. And so with that, I'm also excited to let you all know that just today, we were approved by CalVax as a COVID vaccine provider. And so what that means is that at some point here in the near future, as the supply and demand kind of catches up and evens out, we will be able to order vaccine and have some vaccine clinics, with our own supply of vaccine. But in the meantime, we have utilized one of those partnerships that we formed on Sunday with Dr. Kevin Mackey. He is the Chief Medical Director of the CSD, which is the best way I can explain it is like an overarching group that oversees a lot of the emergency medical services. He definitely interfaces a lot with Dr. Kassirier and as well as with Dr. Oshida. And so working with him, we are happy to say that we have set some dates for vaccine clinics to happen at Folsom High School. And those tentative dates are coming up quickly. February 20th, 27, March 20, and March 27. So they are somewhat soft dates because we need to make sure that that supply and demand that it can be met. And so if we receive notification from Dr. Mackey that we need to push those dates out just a touch, we can be flexible and we can do that. The vaccine clinics will at this point be open to all of phase 1A and the folks in phase 1B that are already open. As we talked about last Thursday, right now phase 1B includes folks who are over 65 years of age or older, law enforcement, and first responders. We are anticipating that pretty soon, Sacramento County will be able to open phase 1B up to educators as well. The clinics will be by appointment only. We will not be taking any walk-up appointments, walk-in people that don't have an appointment. It will be a walk-in clinic rather than a drive-through clinic. And we will be looking for lots of volunteers. So I think I will pause there. I imagine that one thing will have lots of questions that we'll work through as we progress through the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share an update about the COVID safety plan. It's a quick one. The secondary plan is done and it's ready to post. The links are ready on the school websites, and we are just getting the directions out to the sites of how to upload their piece. So it's coming together. It's right there. right where we need it. So I'm happy to say that because at least our plans are intact and they're going to be on the websites. I know in the public health guidance, it's currently for the January 14th guidance, it says that we need to post for days before we can provide in-person instruction. And so on this end, we will be prepared for that. And I think that next Matt has facility updates.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to present a little bit on the high school facility updates and middle school facility updates as far as sanitation, cleaning, PPE, air filtration. All the classrooms have hand sanitizer and disposable masks available upon entry. These are things that will be available. A lot of these things have already happened, but when school gets ready to start, all these things will be deployed. Hand sanitizer stations with touchless dispensers will be placed around the campus. All the common rooms and restrooms and handles. All high-touch areas will be sanitized by custodial staff on a rotating basis throughout the day. And then further sanitizing and deep cleaning and sanitation will occur after school hours in the evenings, after the staff leaves and the students leave. Extra sanitation materials and supplies are available and placed throughout the campus and staff work areas, restrooms, staff restrooms. Middle school sites middle and high school sites, most already have been completed with directional arrows, distance markings, and appropriate signage, but that will all be completed at the middle schools by February 22nd, and the high schools will be complete by March 1st. Do site assessments to make sure that that is in place. Plexiglass has been distributed. That's been going on for months. All of the front office areas have been provided. Teachers have been provided upon request plexiglass for their desks, front flat panels, as well as additional side panels. Student desks that can't be properly social distanced are available for those. They have been placed. More will be available upon request and as needed. As I mentioned, administration areas and media centers also equipped with plexiglass to provide safety as well. All plexiglass requests have been met, and we've been able to provide that. We assume that more will be requested as more come back, and we will continue to order as that need comes up. Next slide, please, Kelly. The next slide addresses HVAC filtration. All secondary sites HVAC units have been cleaned and sprayed with disinfectant, and MERV 13 filters have been installed. That's at all secondary sites. By February 22nd, all middle school air dampers will be open to allow outside air into the rooms. This is something by the MOU, and this is to allow the maximum amount of indoor air, outdoor air as safely permits and conditions to require. Also, the completion of the third-party verification for all middle schools will be completed by February 22nd. This will be the same process completed for the elementary schools. They will verify that all this work has been completed, full detail. They will identify all the units. They will take pictures. They will make sure the MERV 13 filters were installed, the dampers are open, and everything will be complete. The same process will be completed by March 15th for all high schools. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I just am going to provide a quick update in terms of our secondary schools are also ready to reopen in our hybrid schedules. The schools have broken from the information provided by parents. They've broken the kids into the students that will be returning to campus in the hybrid model, as well as the students who have decided with their decisions from their families to remain in distance learning, at least for the rest of this school year. So just going to kind of quickly go through the slides just so you can see what those numbers are. Just as a reminder, it's important to remember on those hybrid numbers, those numbers would be divided in half because half of those kids in the hybrid would be going on our AA days in person. That would be Tuesday and Wednesday. And then the other half would be going on the B group would be going on the Thursday and Friday. So Kelly, if you'd like to just advance through to the next slide. These are continues our middle schools, Mills and Mitchell. And then these are the breakdowns in terms of Cordova High School and Folsom High School in terms of their total numbers. Next slide, Kelly. Vista Del Lago and Folsom Lake High School. Next slide, Kelly. And then Walnutwood. Oh, there we go. Walnutwood and Folsom Lake High School. There should be one more, right? Or no, I think that's it. So, and then these are our cohort numbers for special ed, which is coming over to Ms. Wessinger.
Good evening. So I'm going to start with our special ed cohort enrollment, which is the secondary special ed cohorts we have currently. And then I'm going to talk about our enrollment for the hybrid model. So currently in our special ed cohorts, we have in the middle schools, these are the cohorts that we have and the cohorts that are open. So at Folsom Middle School, we have a total of 6 cohorts. And I would like to mention that our cohorts include each of our special education programs, from the mild mod learning support to the moderate severe self-contained. So at Folsom Middle School, we have 6 cohorts. We have 2 cohorts open and 4 cohorts that are in distance learning. The 2 cohorts that are open are 2 self-contained classes. And in both of the self-contained classes, we have 13 that are back and 9 in distance learning. At Mills Middle School, we have 6 cohorts. We do not have any open cohorts at Mills Middle School. We have a counseling enriched program there, which is a self-contained program that is not open, nor are the 5 mild mod learning support cohorts open at Mills. At Mitchell, we have 8 cohorts, and of the 8 cohorts, we have 3 open in person. 2 of the 3 are self-contained. And the students who are in the self-contained programs that are in person are being served in those 2 cohorts. And then we also have 1 learning support program open there. At Sutter Middle School, we have 9 cohorts. We currently have 3 cohorts open in person. 2 of them are self-contained programs. And in the self-contained program, all 16 of the students that are in those 2 programs are back in person. And we also have 1 learning support program open at Sutter Middle School. Next slide is high school. And at Cordova High School, we have 18 cohorts. We have 5 open in person, and the 5 that are open are all of our self-contained classes at Cordova High. So these are our students with the most significant needs. And the remainder of the cohorts, the 13, include learning support and 2 counseling enriched programs that are in distance learning. At Folsom High School, we have 13 cohorts, and we currently have 5 cohorts open. 2 of them are our counseling enriched programs, and 3 of them are mild mod learning support. We have 4 moderate severe classes, self-contained classes at Folsom High School. None of those are open in distance learning currently. At Vista Del Lago, we have 7 cohorts. 2 of them are open, and those 2 are self-contained. So 2 of the 3 self-contained programs are open at Vista Del Lago, and the remaining classes that are in distance learning are learning support classes. In our ACTT program, which is our 18 to 22-year-old program, all 3 of the cohorts are in person. And what you'll see is that 18 of the students are in person and 16 are in distance learning. At Walnutwood High School, we have 2 cohorts. Both of them are open. And I should have put Kinney and Prospect on here. And at Kinney and Prospect, we have 2 cohorts with 12 students, and neither of those cohorts are open in person currently. They're in distance learning. And so moving to the next slide, our special education hybrid enrollment update for secondary. We have 41 students who will be, and first I want to clarify that these would be our self-contained programs. And so our students who are primarily mainstreamed are represented in the enrollment numbers that Dr. Huber shared. So these are the self-contained classes only. And at middle school, we will have 41 students in person and 20 on distance learning. And at high school, 103 in person and 64 on distance learning. And next up, I believe this is Mr. Ogden.
Good evening, everybody. Before I get started, I'm talking about staffing considerations, and I want to give a special thank you out to all of the teams that have been meeting way for about a year now, weekly in negotiations. Both FCA, CAA, CSEA, and our management team have been working really hard to create a work environment that's safe for our children and for our staff. Some of the considerations we will need to make as we bring secondary back are the interactive process, and that is we do have some staff members who will need some accommodations when we come back to in-person, and HR has been working with both certificated classified staff members and groups to make sure that we have reasonable accommodations in place. We also will have a MOU in place for transitioning our in-person hybrid with both bargaining units, CSEA and FCA. And then we have a MOU that we will update, which is our health and safety measures MOU. The one that we have currently is for elementary, and I'm proud to say that this has kept our students and staff safe. We haven't had any cases of transmission at one of our school sites, and we have been open since November at a elementary site that's been in person. We have not had a transmission. And then lastly, we have some vacant positions that we have not staffed as we've been doing distance learning, but we do need to fill those positions, and we will be filling those over the next couple of weeks. We have most of those positions already posted. The other slide that I'm going to describe here, it really is a reflection of the direction given to us by the board at the last meeting. At the last meeting, we reviewed the January 14th guidance from CDPH, and in that guidance, there was a timeline that reflected when a county had metrics in the red. After a certain amount of time, the county would be assigned a red tier, and then 5 days later, a secondary site, in our scenario, could begin in-person hybrid instruction. I did bring this to the table this week, and I talked to the negotiating teams about this timeline. The negotiating teams, since, we went into distance learning in March 13th of last year. Since that time, we have talked a lot about transitioning from distance learning into hybrid. And it has been the position of the bargaining team that the best time for students and staff to make that transition would be at the transition of a term. For example, that's how we did it with elementary back in November. That was the transition between the first and second trimester. We do have those terms coming up. We have the trimester from second to third happening March 1st. And we have the third quarter transitioning to the fourth quarter, March 15th. We have two schools that are on the trimester system, the entire school, which is Sutter Middle School and Folsom Middle School. Walnut Wood Independent Study School, actually their 7th and 8th grade programs are on the trimester. The balance of our secondary programs are all on the semester or quarter system. When we looked at those timelines also, we did talk about, in order to bring back our staff, we're going to need to consider a couple of things. We're going to need to consider doing some training. And so we did talk about using our Mondays, which are our asynchronous days, to provide staff development. And we looked at doing that every Monday from the 22nd of February till the 22nd of March. That would be 5 opportunities for staff to have training, engage in training. We also talked about having a timeline for making sure that our classes were set up for hybrid. And to do that, we have each class would have 3 groups, a in-person group, a B in-person group, and then a C or D group, which would be the distance learning group. And we worked on a timeline and said that would need to be done before the transitions into the last trimester or the last quarter. And then as a group, as we looked at all of this, I think one of the pieces of the puzzle we also talked about was we do need a date for staff to all report in and start working from the classroom. A date that we did put out there was February 22nd. So these were some of the considerations that we had at the table, and I just wanted to share that with the board and the public.
Sorry about that. So again, with the guidance that we received on January 14th, for elementary schools not yet open, and the way that was written was TK through grade 6, these were the steps that needed to proceed in order to move forward with submitting our COVID safety plan. And we were looking at doing that for grade 6. That was the direction the board gave us at the last meeting. And as we heard from Jennifer Sarin tonight, we have the COVID safety plans completed for middle schools and high schools, which are inclusive of grade 6 in our district. We will be submitting them to our local county public health and the Safe Schools for All team, which is the CDPH team that would be reviewing them. And then they have a timeline in which they review them if they're looking to see if they have any deficiencies. If there are, they have 7 days to report back to us, and we would work on fixing those. And then the timeline gives another 7 days to do so. If there are no deficiencies in the plan, then the guidance says we can open on that 8th day. I think it's really important that we're all on the same page, that we're going to follow the guidance from our local public health and CDPH through this process, as we have been doing, for the last several months. With that, at the last board meeting, we specifically said we would follow CDPH guidance. And as of last night, there were new rules or guidance that was added for a petition process for school districts that were partially open with a phased-in reopening plan that had been adopted by the board previously in the year. So I'm going to ask Ms. Goldsmith to put up, it didn't make it into the presentation because this information was just made public through CDPH last night, but we're going to deviate from this and go down to this new guidance that was posted. And there are 2 petition processes for school districts to continue their reopening, their phased reopening, if they've opened grade levels previously. So this guidance came out last night. It does allow a district such as ours, who have already opened our elementary schools, to pursue this process by submitting a letter of intent to the California Department of Public Health to say that we're interested in pursuing this. And then they have 10 days to respond back to us and say, this is the school safety plan we need from you from Folsom, Cordova. And I haven't seen all the details of that, but I would assume it's going to include our COVID safety plan. We have to comply to what their safety guidelines are when they look at our plan. And Sac County Public Health would be doing the same and working alongside us through this process to make a determination if we can pursue opening our middle schools and high schools. And this would be prior to moving into the red tier if our county is at that case rate of fewer than 25 cases per 100,000. So it really expanded the definition of who could come back at this point, because as we heard from Carrie Kay, we are already at fewer than 25 cases per 100,000. And with this option, we want to pursue this option, submitted a letter of intent, and we'll see, what that safety plan entails. But that is the latest information from CDPH. And again, following what their guidance is, following with our county public health, is the way we'd like to carefully and safely continue to proceed forward. So with that, we'll entertain any questions. I know there was a lot of information here. We have a lot of folks here. And again, Dr. Kasseri is with us as well.
Okay, any board questions?
Mr. President.
Go ahead, Mr. Clark, and then Mr.
Can we navigate back up to page 4? Okay, so looking at that, and it just said that FCPH and CDPH will allow secondary schools to reopen 5 days after the county is moved to red tier. So are we still honoring that, or is it now purple tier? I mean, I'm kind of confused on that one.
The way the guidance reads, that is how they wanted secondary, the model of students moving in secondary schools to reopen at 5 days after they move to red tier. Our 6th grade, we were looking at the 6th grade and doing what we can to prepare for that and follow the guidance for 6th grade based on the motion last week. So that would be within purple. I just put this information on the slide to show what the guidance currently said as we started working on that.
Okay. So there was talk about the confirmation of the vaccine rollout. I guess we're looking at 220, 227, 320, 327. So that is not set in stone, correct?
Yes, and I mean, Dr. Casirier is on the call as well, and she has her pulse very much on vaccine availability. But that's, yes, they're soft. I'm going to say they're soft only because there may be some points where vaccine is not available, and there are a lot of different places, not just Folsom, Cordova, that are able to offer these to folks in Tier 1B and above. But as you've probably heard in the news this week, Natomas Unified started yesterday, or no, today. I'm losing track of my days. Today's Thursday. And then tomorrow, there will be one in the Elk Grove Unified School District at Cosumnes Oaks. But those are not open to educators yet because the county has not opened Phase 1B up to educators yet. Yes.
Right.
And I don't know if Dr. Casirier wanted to add anything or weigh.
Yes, I can speak to that, and also the issue about the new guidance that you emailed us about. So starting off with the vaccine, we get a weekly allocation, and so once we're notified of our allocation, that's when we're able to plan for the following week. And depending on how much we get, because it's not always guaranteed. So far in the last 3 weeks, at least, it's been going up every week from 13,000. And this week we were notified that our allocation is 18,000. So we are notified this week and we get the doses the following week. So that's now we're starting to plan for next week clinics. And that's the reason why we have to have the soft dates, because things might change. We have been in discussion with SCOE, and we have set the 16th to open it up to educators. So the clinics starting next week will include educators as well as school staff.
So there is a very high probability that it will start on the 20th. I mean, here's the deal. I don't want teachers to say, oh, well, you know what? I think we're going to get our shots on the 20th. We have to wait and see. And then there's a big letdown of, oh, no, looks like we've got to push that back. I just want to make sure that and it's kind of hard to push for it because we don't know what we're going to get, but I just want to make sure that they have a date that they can hang their hat on and not say, well, I think I'm going to get it, or no, I'm not going to get it. So you're thinking that we may get a decision from Dr. Mackey or confirmation, you want to say the 16th?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I mean, I wouldn't want our teachers to get their hopes up high, and well, actually saying a soft rollout is kind of a letdown for me. But I was hoping for a more definite date, a more solid date, so teachers can plan and get their shots. So we'll have to wait until the 16th, but it is what it is.
Yeah, you'll probably get notification before the 16th, but because we just got our notification on Wednesday, and then we have to, make decisions on where the vaccine goes, because there's more demand than the doses that we get. And then we submit that and notify everyone how much they're getting, and then they're able to finalize the plans for the clinics. So you will, I'm sure you'll get the notification in the next couple of days.
Okay. And another thing I wanted to ask is, if we don't have enough to get all of our teachers, I don't know, I'm going to say 1,100 vaccinated. How do we work that? Do we wait until we get more, or do we try to get those 1,100 or whatever vaccinated? I'm just trying to figure out the risk of running out. You know, if teachers make plans to get vaccinated, to get there, and all of a sudden they're out.
It's only by appointment. So what we do is once the clinic is set up, a link will go out to the school contacts, and then the teachers and staff are able to register for an appointment. And
Okay.
and of course it's limited. It's probably going to be maybe 1,000 to 1,200 slots that will be available.
Okay.
So should be prepared to know that we're not going to get to everybody with just one clinic. It's actually going to be an ongoing process because minimum 23,000 total that would need vaccination. So it's going to take us several weeks to go through, but every week we will open up new appointments and people can sign up for them.
Okay, thank you. And going to page 5, we talked about the middle and high school delivery of PPE and all that stuff like that. Matt, I believe you said that you have it up in storage. Is it in storage somewhere? And they haven't been delivered out to the middle schools, correct?
Oh, the PPE is being delivered as necessary, but as the kids come back, then more supplies will be delivered. But
Okay,
yes,
especially at our middle and high school, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
I just want to make sure that they have the product, you know, obviously before school starts, and not scrambling to get it. So I was just curious about that. And on page 6, there was talk of a third party verification. Who is that third party? Is it another contractor that we're working with, or?
Yes, it's a combination of contractors. We have 3 different companies that we work with, same as the elementary school. We have a spreadsheet that they all use. They fill out, they go through, they check all the units, they log all the units, they tag them, they take pictures of them, they verify that the MERV 13 filters have been installed, they verify the dampers have been opened, and then they also recognize any conditions that may need to be repaired, and then we do future repairs on that, but they will either manually or automatically open the dampers to make sure, and then they take pictures and verify they are open. Just to give you an example, there was 175 pages of Folsom Hills alone were taken just to verify and document everything that was done.
Okay. And then one more question about the 22nd and our teachers returning at that time. Obviously, are they going to be teaching? I think I read something about, what was it? I can't remember what it was. I think it was professional development.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my question. I'm committing to having all the air filtration and everything and all third-party verification completed by the 22nd.
Okay. Well, I think this is a Don question about our teachers coming back on the 22nd. Are they coming back for professional development, or actually coming back to teaching classes?
Well, we've talked about both. So that would be the first day that we had professional development. And then we would like to set a date that would be the first in-person date for everyone to come into their classrooms and make sure their technology works, and start getting everything up and running. We have many teachers who have been in their classrooms and their classrooms are fully functional. We have some teachers who haven't had a chance to set their classrooms up yet. So I think giving teachers a heads up on here's the timeline we expect everybody to be back in their rooms. We tentatively put out there the 22nd.
Okay, so just for clarification and understanding, let's say that on the 1st, they will be ready for in classroom instruction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then say 3:15, since we're talking about, the fourth quarter, they will be in classroom again, correct?
Yes.
And everything will be set up, safety, HVAC, and all that would be good to go.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for right now. I do have a few more, but I will extend my time to the rest of the board.
Any other board questions?
Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. Hoover.
Yeah, so I do have a few, and I appreciate the time. I do, apologize for the amount here, but definitely have a few. First of all, thank you to Carrie and Dr. Casserier for your continued work on the vaccine front. I really, hope to be able to get our teachers vaccinated as soon as possible. Dr. Casserier, just up front, and I promise this will be the only question I ask you tonight. I'm hearing a lot from teachers in other jurisdictions, other counties, El Dorado, Placer, that seem to be getting vaccinated pretty quickly. And I know there's got to be challenges in Sacramento. We're obviously a larger county, but why is it that Sacramento still is really struggling with the 1B availability? And is it because we have more healthcare workers, or is our county prioritizing things differently? I've just been curious I know a lot of people have been asking that question.
Yeah, it's basically that Sacramento County is much larger than our neighbors. And also we happen to have a lot more people who work in Sacramento that actually live in other counties, and those who work in Sacramento are vaccinated here. And in fact, if you look around, for example, we have 4 major health systems, and all of those healthcare workers, many were vaccinated through their hospital. There are also a lot more that are still coming through our system, our clinic, as well as a lot of additional that are not affiliated with those hospitals that we're still getting through. So that the vaccine that we get, we are administering it. We're not keeping any. We're using the same guidance that is given by the state. So it just takes longer for us to get through.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I don't know who this question is for necessarily, but do we know anything yet if the safety plan we have already put together will meet the requirements for the new CDPH waiver process?
Safety plan is primarily about making sure that we have our measures in place. So yes, and then we would, if there's new revisions that come back to us, we'll work on them. So I anticipate that we're in a good position.
And I did want to hear from Dr. Casserier on that too, because I did send her that new guidance, and Dr. Casserier, I think you were prepared to answer that in the previous question, but can you share with us?
Yes, and actually we tried to email you, but for some reason our emails were getting blocked. So maybe we'll circle back with you and find out whether there was some technological thing. But anyway, yes, we did review the material. It does, and it's actually very clear in the guidance that the CDPH put out in January. And this is on page 8, that schools in the purple tier, schools may not reopen for grades 7 through 12. So I think that was one of your questions, that with the new documents that they sent out for a safety review, whether that was something that you could look at. Since we're still in the purple tier, the only consideration that you would have is for the 6th grade. And my thought that since now we are below the 25 per 100,000, probably the best process for you to take would be to submit your safety plan and within 7 days get a response and be able to move on.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And just to clarify, Sarah, on the safety plan, first of all, Sarah and your team, thank you so much for your swift action today to start that process. I really appreciate that. Am I correct that we have already applied or sent, I guess, the letter of intent to do that And if so, what is the next step in the process, and what is the projected timeline for potential approval?
Again, going to the link that was in that memo that we had up on the screen there, the first step in the process is to submit a letter of intent that we fit into that second criteria petition that we're seeking. So I did submit that today. The links are down there, and they're going to CDPH, to the safety review team. And then they have, they'll tell us specifically what they need in that school safety plan. And as Jennifer said, a lot of that will be inclusive of our COVID safety plan, but there may be other pieces we haven't heard back yet. And then the next time frame are 10 days to get everything submitted to them once we hear back that, okay, you fit the criteria. Now this is what we need from you. You have 10 days to get it to us. So that's the next frame.
Great. Thank you. And I assume, and I won't, this is a rhetorical question, but I assume that if there are not a lot of changes need to be made, or if we can meet those pretty easily, that we'll do it before the 10-day mark, or we'll get it in as soon as we can. But I appreciate that. Matt, I guess a question for you, I guess a couple questions for you. First, I noticed in the new CDPH guidelines, they changed the sanitation requirements. So they actually reduced them based on new science that, kind of shows that sanitation is a little bit less necessary to combat COVID-19. Have we adjusted our sanitation protocols based on that guidance? And it just sounded like there's still a lot of sanitation happening, which is great if that's what the guidance calls for. But I was just curious if we had made adjustments or anything like that.
Jennifer may want to chime in, but we're not planning to make any changes at this time. We're still following the same process that we have been. If the guidelines suggest that we can lessen that, then we can look at that and make those adjustments as necessary.
I agreed, Matt. That is it exactly. We have not changed them. We have not changed that procedure.
Okay. Are there any cost concerns, or are we okay on that front from a sanitation standpoint?
We've purchased the supplies. So far, we're okay at the elementary and middle school as staff. The high school, we may have to bring in subs periodically, depending on how that works. Obviously, we're not going to be able to wipe, desks and everything between every class. We would wipe all the high spot areas, clean and sanitize the high spot areas, provide the necessary materials and supplies into the classrooms as necessary. But at this point, we don't anticipate that. We may have to bring in subs as necessary, but at this point, we don't anticipate a big increase.
Okay, thank you. And then a little bit of a harder question, I guess, and I think this is just a little bit of a point of frustration for me, for sure. I don't know about others on the board, but I feel like the board has asked or have been told for a few months now that we'd be ready to reopen once we get the green light for secondary. But it sounds like there's still a lot of things left on the HVAC systems that, in order to get them ready for prime time, so to speak. Is there a reason that some of these won't be ready until March 15th? And is there any way to move up that timeline for, on the chance that we do get a green light prior to that?
For the high school, like I said, all the MERV 13 filters and all the units have been cleaned and disinfected. That part is done. The only remaining part is the opening of making sure the dampers have all been opened and the third-party verification. That takes a lot of time to do that. Staff, contractors have been concentrating on making repairs on the existing systems. It doesn't mean the dampers weren't open. They were just going back and identifying and fixing things. They are concentrating the efforts now on that. As we indicated, middle schools will be done by the 22nd. We're looking at ways to improve the March 15th date. I think that probably could be improved. We wouldn't want to commit to that until we have further discussions. But that possibly could be improved for that section of it.
Okay, thank you.
May I add to that, please? Just a point of reference about the way the guidance changes. Some new guidance on HVAC infiltration came out right on November 30th. So a lot of the work that was prepared, and then now some has been, revised. That's sometimes this is a good example of showing how sometimes the guidance may change, and then we have to go back and reevaluate or do some things. So I wanted to point that out.
Okay, so there was new guidance on that issue, or that
when the Cal OSHA temporary standard came out on November 30th, it just has a much lengthier section on the filtration, and we had to look at it and make sure that we were back, on point with all of it. So it wasn't necessarily a step back. It's just that when the guidance comes out and you're working, it does sometimes halt what we're doing a bit, just to make sure that the work we're doing is in the right direction.
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that additional clarification. My last question is on this professional development piece. I think, Dawn, I guess this one's for you. For teachers obviously have a lot of different levels of technical knowledge and ability. And, I think some may find 5 days to be a lot to get used to their new technology if they're able to catch on pretty quickly to it. Can teachers opt out of extra days if they feel they're already comfortable with the technology sooner? Or I guess, how does it work? I'm not suggesting that we allow that. I'm curious if that's how it works.
I'd like to defer that answer to Dr. Huber.
Yeah, and the training, the professional development is voluntary. And so teachers do get to decide what their needs are. And so the idea was to provide that professional development over a period of days to give a lot of options to teachers in terms of when it would work best for them. Also want to note that every professional development we've done this year back to the summer, not only has it been live and folks are engaging in the moment, but all those sessions have been recorded. And so we have actually a large library, and it continues to grow. And in this case as well, everything that's provided will be recorded and housed in that library as well. So teachers can go back and refresh, and look at that again, or, watch Pam do that one more time as they're learning the technology. And so it really does come down to individual teachers knowing what they need. And so there'll be lots of opportunities and then lots of places for them to go to keep tapping into resources, because this is going to be a transition. We're all very mindful of the fact that this is a new skill as teachers learn to teach in this concurrent model. So that is the plan, and that is the hope.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Any other board questions?
Mr. President?
Go ahead, David.
Okay, David, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a couple. The first one's for Dr. Casserier, and I probably know the answer, but I just have to ask the question anyway. So with these vaccine clinics that are going to be hosted at Folsom High on February 20th and 27th and March 20th and 27th, assuming that phase 1B has been open for educators next week, is there any way we could have, and I don't know what the hours of these clinics are, I'll just say, 8 to 5. That may not be accurate or not, but let's say it's 8 to 5. Is there any way we could designate the first hour, like from 8 to 9, to be for educators only? Just because, we're desperate to get our teachers vaccinated. Is that even an option?
The system that we use makes it difficult to do that. I know that Dr. Mackey had asked about that, but the problem is that once we send it out, anybody who gets the link is able to sign up. And of course, if they're not in the tiers that we're targeting, then we are able to go in and remove those appointments. But I know that that's one of the questions that Dr. Mackey asked, and the system that we have right now doesn't permit that. we are probably going to be moving to another system soon, and maybe that opportunity will be there, but right now it isn't.
So would it be fair to say that if the system is changed or enhancements are made that would have that capability to have maybe an hour dedicated just for teachers, that the county would at least consider that if that was possible?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess this question might be for Ms. Kay or perhaps Mr. Huber. Do we know how many of our teachers have already been vaccinated because they live in a county that already allows for teachers to be vaccinated? So maybe we have some teachers that live in El Dorado County or Placer County who are already vaccinating teachers, and they may have already gotten their vaccination because they qualify as a resident of those counties, and in fact, they're a teacher. Do we know that yet?
I don't have access to that information because, again, it's not a requirement for employment or return to work kind of a situation. And so we're not gathering that information. But you're right. There are some numbers of our staff in our district who have been able to already get either the first or maybe even both doses, which would perhaps lighten the load a little bit. But when we do have these clinics, at Folsom High, a couple of things I can clarify the time for you because I didn't say that in my earlier statement. We're looking at 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And again, everything will be by appointment. And we're a part of Sacramento County, just like Natomas and Elk Grove. And so these clinics will be open unless that system can be enhanced to all who are in those eligible tiers.
I'm wondering, is it possible, obviously we can't force people to disclose whether they've gotten the vaccine or not, but, could we voluntarily ask our staff that, if you've already been so lucky to get the vaccine, we're just trying to understand what numbers we're looking at, and maybe even ask them at the same time, do you plan on getting the vaccine? I mean, obviously we're not going to force people to get the vaccine if they don't want to get the vaccine, but it might be helpful for us to know that, all right, these teachers and staff want the vaccine, but they haven't had it yet. These teachers and staff don't want the vaccine, and these staff and teachers have already gotten the vaccine. I mean, that might help us to figure out how we can be more helpful to our teachers and staff when the opportunity comes for them to get vaccinated, to make sure we get them emails letting them know the various options they have. And I assume that once the 1B is opened for educators, that our teachers, even though they might live in Folsom or Rancho Cordova, would be eligible to get to go to Sacramento or Elk Grove to log on and get on an appointment list in those areas if there's a vaccine clinic going on. Has there been any discussion or thought about that doing that?
Well, to your question and thoughts about asking folks who may have already received vaccinations, I'm going to let Dawn answer that one because that seems a little bit more like an HR side of things. To be able to do that ask is certainly not hard, but then to hang on to that information. But yes, I do know, other clinics certainly will be open if Sacramento County opens up to educators next week. It would be the clinics that are out there for the public to take advantage of the appointments. I know Dr. Oshida is planning on continuing his clinics at Jesuit, and Dr. Mackey, in addition to rolling out the one with us, is partnered with Elk Grove Unified, Natomas Unified. That is another operation with Dr. Oshida's partnership. And I know Dignity Health is also looking at partnering with LEAs. And so there's a lot of great things in the works. And I think when we have the anxieties right now about will the vaccines be available, and I think it'll all catch up. And we will get folks vaccinated. Will we get all of our staff vaccinated on that first Saturday? I don't think so. We're going to have those 2 Saturdays to do it, but we will get through it. And so, Dawn, I don't know if you wanted to speak a little bit about like polling our folks or not?
We did something akin to that. What we did was when we heard that El Dorado was providing vaccines to educators, we ran our database of staff members who lived in El Dorado, and then we pulled their email addresses and we sent everyone who lived in El Dorado County a link to allow them to access that. And we'll continue to look for that opportunity. So if we have, for example, vaccines here, or if they're in Elk Grove or Natomas, we do have staff that live in different areas, and we'll continue to search the database and get out the links so people can sign up for the vaccine clinics.
Okay. Yeah, I think anything that we can do on an administrative side to help our teachers and our staff, we should. Obviously our teachers are teaching during the day and they may not necessarily be able to jump on the computer at any time to research, the options. So the more we can provide them easy, guidance to, various clinics and times and hyperlinks and telephone numbers, I think that's all good and something that we could definitely do and to help our teachers out. And this might be even too much, but I've been seeing on the news these I forget what they call them, the COVID angels, I think they're calling them, who are volunteers who are helping the elderly to sign up for appointments. So they're actually making the appointments for the elderly because, obviously, if they're like my mom, they don't really understand computers. So, but is that something that we could even do for our teachers? If the teachers give us permission to sign them up for a vaccine clinic so that they don't need to be, obviously they can do it themselves, but if they want some assistance, might we be able to provide some assistance so that they can focus on their educating responsibilities and not be searching the web for opportunities? So, something to think about, I guess. Yeah. I guess this question is maybe for Dr. Kaligian. I just want to confirm. So the new CDPH guidance that came out last night. So sounds like we're pursuing it, and I'm 100% supportive of that. But I think one of the questions that someone alluded to, but maybe didn't directly ask, if we're pursuing the new CDPH guidance for a waiver, that doesn't necessarily preclude us from pivoting to if the county opens in red, let's say, earlier than we think, and we have the 5 days, we could go either direction. It's just giving us another option. So if the waiver process is going slower than we expect and the red tier goes faster than we expect, we could just switch from that to that. Is that fair?
Yes, and I think as long as we're keeping our guidance based, or our reopening based on the guidance that we get from CDPH and Sac County Public Health, that we're going to be ready to start whichever of those comes first. And again, that's contingent on what we find out in this new petition process that we'll be learning more about next week. But in the meantime, what it does say is we abide by the January 14th CDPH guidance until we hear anything differently.
Yeah. And then I guess my final question for now is, assuming that we go along the waiver as the fastest path towards reopening our secondary schools, what is your recommendation or staff's recommendation for a realistic time frame for opening the middle schools and the high school? Have you given any thought to that, of what your preliminary thoughts are for reopening?
Well, if everything proceeds on track and we'll assume, everything can move forward with approvals in this process, thinking about what's in the best interest of our middle school and high school students and our teachers, it makes sense to make that change at the grading period. The upcoming trimester change, which is March 1st, and then the upcoming fourth quarter change, which is March 15th. That just seems to be the least disruptive. If we've got all the other health and safety approvals in place, that would be my recommendation.
Is it that because part of the reason being the least disruptive is because there's a semester or trimester ending testing going on, and we don't want to, I guess, disrupt the students while they're taking tests. Is that the thought process?
Yes, because I think what we're talking about, this is a major transition. We've heard our teachers are, anxious and excited to come back, but they are going to be navigating some new technology for those that, haven't been in their classrooms yet. Some are already navigating it, but having students in front of you and live streaming in at the same time is something new. And I think to be fair to all of our students and staff, we want to give them the optimum ability to perform well on their upcoming finals. And I wouldn't recommend that we disrupt that process, knowing that there's going to be a transition shortly after that with the change of the trimester or the semester or the quarter.
All right, thank you. And then I guess it's not a question for anybody, it's just an observation based on something that Board Member Hoover brought up about the sanitizing guidelines. I'm not sure I would be supportive of reducing the sanitation guidelines. We've already got it set up and we're prepared for it. I think I would be supportive of maintaining them, even if it means we're being a little more aggressive than we need to. The fact that we're already set up for it, I don't think we necessarily need to reduce it, at least not now. So just a thought there, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Hui.
So following up on the train of thought of, if we moved into the red prior to getting the go-ahead to open secondary, Dr. Colligan, that you were just mentioning, I know it would be a long shot, but numbers have been dropping pretty quickly. So if, let's say, in 2 weeks it happened to move to the red, which would give us a March 1st potential open. I guess this question for Mr. Washburn, would we be prepared for that across campuses?
Well, being prepared and in meeting the requirements of the MOU are probably two different things. I mean, I think we'd be prepared from a sanitation standpoint, from supplies, having filtration units in. The only thing by March 1st that would be a challenge at just the high school level would be getting the final piece of the third-party verification and the dampers, make sure those are open. That would be the only thing that would be a challenge as far as just at the high school level. We're always looking to improve that, but that is something that would probably be a challenge, that one minor piece.
Okay, not as much of a challenge across the middle school campuses, though.
Middle schools, no. We're prepared. We're ready for February 22nd.
Okay. And I had a question, I suppose, probably for Dr. Huber. You had a slide, and forgive me, I don't have the page number, of the families that had signed up for hybrid versus distance learning. And I'm curious, if a family didn't respond one way or the other, were they marked in hybrid or were they marked in distance learning? Or can you maybe describe how that went?
I believe most of the schools marked them in hybrid to kind of as a safety measure. And then I know all the campuses were very aggressive in reaching out and contacting families if they hadn't heard from them. So I think at this point in the game, pretty much all the schools know exactly where families are, and corrections have been made if that was incorrect.
Okay, great. So really low rate of not returning a response for that. That's great. I assume that whatever numbers those are, very few of them that might be in hybrid. We could assume maybe there's just a couple in each grade that might end up moving to distance learning, but you're saying for the most part, this is what we're looking at.
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. And then Ms. Wessinger, I had a question about you had showed us the special ed cohorts. And again, I don't have the page number. I'm sorry about that. There we go. just to help me understand how to read the numbers, the number of cohorts in distance learning, is that a combination of families that chose to keep their students home, as well as, circumstance of maybe not having the staff to open those cohorts in person?
Probably more not having the staff to open the cohorts. So the opening of the cohorts was voluntary. So where you see cohorts that are open, so looking at the second column, number of in-person cohorts, those are staff who volunteered to return. There were a couple of cases early on where even where we had some staff volunteering, we didn't have enough to open a classroom because maybe we had a teacher and not enough aides, or aides and not a teacher. But in most cases, we were able to get those staffed.
Okay, so it might be some students that have just chosen to be home, but largely it would just be we don't have the staff to bring those back. Sounds like.
Yes. So what you see, for example, if you look at the first line where you're looking at Folsom Middle School, there's 6 cohorts. The number of in-person cohorts is 2. So the number of students in person, that third column. So 13 students of the students who belong to those 2 in-person cohorts. 13 of them are in person and 9 of them chose to stay on distance learning.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. That is really helpful to understand, make sure I know how to read those numbers. This one I do have a page number for, page 16, and I think this would be for Mr. Ogden. We've listed the A groups, the B groups, and then the C, D groups. Can you just explain what the difference between a C and a D group is for me?
Some of the schools, when they were creating their schedules, called it the C group, and others called it D just for distance learning. So it's basically the third group that are
the same
distance
thing.
learning. The same thing. Just I didn't want to have people change their enrollment forms.
Okay, that's understandable. Thank you for explaining that. I was also curious. I know it's been mentioned that we have had teachers in their classrooms, playing around with their technology, making sure they know how it works. Do we currently have teachers that are teaching in their classrooms?
We have quite a large number of teachers that are teaching in their classrooms currently.
Any rough idea of kind of a percentage of teachers that are?
I couldn't give you the number off the top of my head, but every parking lot has teachers' cars in it every day.
Okay.
They're working from classrooms. Yes.
Great. Perfect. Well, that's it for me, Board President. Thank you.
Clark.
Sure. I just had 2 quick questions.
Okay, Allie, go ahead. And then Mr. Clark.
This is for Mr. Ogden. How will students be separated into the A and B groups? Is it alphabetical, or do we know yet?
Hi, Allie. It's my understanding that each site has already made those determinations. So I'm not sure how they did it, but I do believe they were trying to make sure families were on the same group. So the way an A track would work, and Mr. Huber probably was in on those conversations, the A students go to school on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I think we tried to keep families together. So you didn't have, a younger brother going on Tuesday, Wednesday, and the older sister going on Thursday, Friday.
That's correct.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you. And then I just had one more question. I think this is probably for Dr. Kaligian. If we were to go through with the waiver process and we received the waiver and we were allowed to open, would it protect us at all if something were to happen in the future and schools are forced to close again? Would it protect us from having to close again, or not really?
That's a really good question, Allie. And I think part of that is contingent on what happens in the health environment and landscape, and maybe Dr. Kasiri has a better answer for that. When the Christmas holiday was coming up, we were told to anticipate spike in cases just because of all the gatherings that were happening, and our students weren't in school for a minimum of 2 weeks. And then that caused us to, make the decision to pivot to all distance learning for a week after our winter break. But I would think, if the trends continue, and if Dr. Kasiri is seeing what we're seeing, and it's optimistic, hopefully we wouldn't have to. But there have been considerations given to those districts that were open prior to a transition to a purple tier or a deep purple tier, that were then allowed to reopen once, the tiers or the metrics improve. Dr. Kasiri, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, that's correct. Once the school is open, even if the numbers start going in the wrong direction, the school will be allowed to remain open.
Okay, thank you. That was my main concern, whether we were to go through with the waiver or wait for the being in the red tier, if it really made a difference or not. Thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ellie. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make this really quick. I just had some clarifying answers that I'm looking for, and I wanted to piggyback off the idea that Mr. Reed had for that hour, dedicated hour for our teachers. Well, I don't think it was for teachers, so Mr. Reed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was looking at, and I want to push this again because I think it's important that we try to figure out a priority for our teachers that are already on campus and teaching. I think I asked if that was possible. I'll ask it again. Is it possible? And maybe use that hour, that dedicated hour for those teachers.
No, we did discuss that and made the decision that we will not make a distinction. Part of that is that the teachers who are not in school, who are still in distance learning, also have a strong argument to say, why didn't you start with us so that we can feel more comfortable being able to get back into in-person learning? And again, everything that you've heard, they've said that reopening of schools is not predicated on teachers being vaccinated. It definitely does, in the bigger picture, it helps us to get to where we want to go, which is to reduce the number of cases so that we can have all the students back in school and go back to our regular lives. But it is not prerequisite for opening schools.
Okay. And then I guess Dr. Kaligian, I had another question, probably a clarifying question. You talked about the letter of intent, which went out yesterday? Today. Okay. And CDPH approval is going to come around when?
They have received it. They'll identify if we meet the criteria under number 2, which is the waiver criteria that we identified when we sent in the letter of intent, and then they'll tell us within the next, I would think Monday's a holiday, so I'm going to say maybe by Tuesday, this is what we need from you for your school safety plan, and we have 10 days once we hear back to get whatever it is they're asking for, which is probably our COVID safety plan, and there may be some additional information too. Okay, so
10 days after, and let's say that they needed additional information that they're asking for. Is there a delay in that once we get it in?
We're going to do our best to respond as quickly as we can. It depends what they're asking clarification for. It could be very simple and a quick turnaround.
Right. I mean, do we have a certain amount of days to get what they're asking? Additional paperwork or whatever. Will we have time, or how many days will we have to get that back into them if they requested it?
My understanding is 7 days to
okay.
remedy any deficiencies that they find.
So I'm trying to do some fuzzy math here. I know there's a holiday Monday. Today is Thursday, Friday. So we're looking at like 20 days, probably about 18, to get everything in, to get approved and get our kids back on campus. Am I correct on that?
Yes, I would say that's, an optimistic timeline of what we're looking at. Hopefully, around the 1st of March, but
okay.
I don't make the final decisions on it.
And maybe this is a question for Dr. Kasiri or Carrie. Is there a chance that we might be in red by then? Slim chance, small chance?
I said before, that's kind of a magic 8-ball question.
Yeah, I think that would be difficult. I think mid-March is more realistic.
Okay, I'm just wishful thinking here. All right. And then one more question, and I know that the audience has tons of questions or comments. The FCUSD push out of the link that teachers can sign up once it becomes available, is that on the district website, or is that going to be on the county website? How is that looking?
We do not make it public, because when we do, then anybody is able to access the appointments. So we have a list of contacts for each of the school districts. So actually, probably some of them, it's more than one contact. And so we will be sending that link to those contacts, and then they would be responsible to get it out to their schools.
Okay. All right. I know that the audience has their hands up, so I did have a few more questions, but I will defer back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I appreciate the board, all their questions. So having the president, there's always very little left. I do have one clarifying question in the presentation, and I apologize, I don't remember the page number. But Walnut Wood, I thought the numbers were interesting there. If you go back to that one. And it looked like the majority of kids wanted to still stay distance learning. Is there a rationale behind that or information? It's because
not really, and obviously, from the slide, you're right. The majority do want to remain in distance learning. I think part of that might simply be the program itself. The students aren't on campus every day anyway, so they're used to the intermittent contact. And so, the move to distance learning has actually been pretty comfortable for a lot of our Walnut Wood students. So,
yeah. Okay, and it's been very successful. Well, I guess that's a different question, but it seems like, are they doing well in the distance learning?
Yes, I don't have that data right in front of me, but there's been no concerns raised from the principal in that regard. So everyone is, as far as I'm aware, are doing very well at Walnut Wood.
Okay, I just wanted that clarifying question, and I appreciate that. With that said, I want to take it back out to comments by the public, and we want to maintain this at least 40 minutes and 2 minutes per comment. So how many hands do we have raised now?
We have about 9, Mr. Short.
Can we proceed, please?
Okay. The first speaker is Corrine.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak again. I really felt the need to respond to Board Member Hoover's comments in response to staff comments earlier tonight. This will take just a moment. The district leadership and the board need to understand that for the majority of your staff, you have lost our trust, and we are tired of feeling dismissed. The science we refer to is not inaccurate. Please do not insult our understanding of what is going on. There are equally strong articles and an equal number on both sides of the debate. We have presented these facts over and over in the past months and been ignored. The science is incomplete and can be cherry-picked, which this board has frequently done. Considering what we have seen from you this year and what we heard in the last board meeting and what we see on your Facebook posts, we don't trust your motives and considerations. Your decisions need to clearly reflect all stakeholders, not just a part. And as it stands right now, your staff does not feel that we are in all stakeholders. Thank you.
Next, we have Mark. Mark, you may proceed. Oh, can you unmute yourself, Mark?
Hello?
Yes, please proceed, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody, for letting me speak tonight. Thank you for the presentations this evening. A comment or question geared towards Dr. Kasseri. Thank you very much for the information about Folsom High School potentially becoming a vaccination clinic over the next few weeks. it's unclear with the comments about, is this a vaccination clinic solely for educators, or is it going to be a vaccination clinic that's going to be open for public use for the tier 1B and above? As of now, the education workers are not eligible for vaccination, but assuming that Folsom High School is opened, would this then be open to any educator in the county plus anyone in that existing tier 1B and above? So it's unclear if this is a county public clinic or if this is solely for Folsom Cordova staff members and also for the public that are eligible to receive the vaccine. A second comment is regarding the desire to go back to school either at the beginning or end of a trimester or of a quarter system. I would just advocate for the board to consider that any additional time in the classroom would be beneficial for the students, regardless if it's in the quarter system or in the trimester system. I would hate to lose the opportunity to return to the classroom for a week or 2 or 3 because we're waiting for a quarter to end or a trimester to end. Likewise, if the trimester ends and we're not back in the classroom, is that now going to be the excuse or the rationale for not going back into school, say the 2 weeks into that final trimester or just a couple weeks into that final quarter? So while it's a good idea, I would recommend the board not use the trimester or quarters as a guideline for when to return or not to return. Just don't lose the opportunity to get the children back in the classroom. Thank you.
Next, we have Jen.
Hi. So I know I spoke earlier, and I did want to publicly thank Mr. Clark, who called me twice today in regards to my email, my lengthy email, and I appreciate you, Mr. Clark. I do truly feel that you have our best interests as teachers at heart. I also would like to thank Dr. Kaligian for personally replying to that same email. It is appreciated. So not everything that I have to say is 100% negative. But I did want to remind you on Mondays what teachers typically do already and what you would be taking away from us if we were going to be doing these professional development days on Mondays. I'll just kind of give you a recap of my Monday. This Monday, a couple days ago, we have the new crazy attendance procedures that we are required to do, which do take a very long time. I had an IEP meeting, an amendment meeting, department meetings, staff meetings. Then there's the lesson planning, grading, office hours, and meeting with students, and the many emails to reply to, as well as being a parent. And right now, while the district is graciously helping out at student care is not available on Mondays. So I would like for you to take some of those things into consideration and maybe move some of these professional development days to the week and give us actual, and don't take away our prep time, which is Monday. And that is kind of a sacred time for us teachers. So thank you so much for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Next, we have Dan.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Dan, and Dan McCrossin. I'm a music teacher at Mitchell Middle School. I've been there for 19 years. And I want to address the bringing 6th graders back on the 22nd, which is what the agenda says. So I'm going to specifically talk to that. Now, I normally have 40 to 70 kids in class, and this year it's a little bit less, but let me let you know what it's going to be like to have only 6th graders in class. My first 2 periods 1, 2, 3, are choir, which is grades 6 through 8, and then I have intermediate band and intermediate orchestra, which is grades 6 and 7. So in each one of those classes, I will have a grand total on each day of 5 students. 5. I went through my grade book this morning and I counted how many 6th graders are choosing to come back to school. And on an A day, it's 5. On a B day, in some classes, it's 4. In one class, it's 6. So not a lot of students. Now, these kids are going to be going to school. Normally, they're in a large room with a bunch of kids playing and singing, and it's safety in numbers. But now there's 5 of them, and they will be playing into my microphone because I'm teaching on Zoom to the kids at home who are muted and playing along with us. And how intimidating is that? It just doesn't seem like good teaching to me. These are real numbers. I pulled them up this morning. None of my classes will have more than 6 present at a time, while everyone else is at home playing or singing with their mics off. It's just not good teaching. For the students' education, it makes little sense. Now, to be clear, all teachers want students back in the classroom, but only when safety procedures are in place, and they are not. An agreement is made with the members in the district. There is not. And teachers are at least given the opportunity to get a vaccine. Please, we're so close. Act with prudence and patience. Let's do this safe for everyone.
Next, we have Wendy.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak this evening. I have some questions about this February 22nd deadline requirement. I'm not quite sure what it is, what you're asking teachers to do, because it looks like we're going to be required to be in our classrooms when some of us don't have our equipment there. Our equipment's at home. We've been using it at home. So my question is this a requirement? If it is, why? Is it because the technology in our empty classrooms is better than our technology at home? Is it because the building is where learning is going to happen if we're supposed to be teaching from our classrooms, even if students aren't there? Is it because we're not working hard enough? Is it because we can't be trusted to do our jobs? That's kind of what it feels like. We know that going into our facilities aren't necessarily safe, not when we share bathrooms with 17 to 25 other individuals. We know secondary students are suffering from mental health issues as a result of our isolating, socially distanced lives. As teachers, we know, and we're doing everything we can in our power to help connect with kids, to reach out to families, to provide support, just as we've done every year. Some forget that we're in unprecedented times. So my question is, how will reopening a school building now solve mental health issues when fewer than 1/3 of our students are actually physically present at the time? Those who are not teachers often operate on theory, not practicality, especially when they don't listen to the experts, those of us in the classroom. Yes, even remotely, we are in the classroom. Because of those of us in the classroom are lifelong learners, we're learning from others. We're learning that in-person instruction will often remain digital because it's not feasible to adequately address 2 disparate audiences simultaneously. Secondary teachers across the nation who have done so have sacrificed everything, only to find that they just can't do it all. Thank you.
Next, we have Casey.
Oh,
Casey, you're on.
Yep, got it. Oh, to have your shamelessness. Oh, to be so removed from our teaching day. And oh, to be so removed from the people to whom you have assigned me to act as a steward. Oh, to be this Ford. Oh, to be you. Eliminating remote teaching and directing all teachers back to their classrooms to continue distance learning in 11 days. Wow. Oh, to be so reckless. Your demand is a non-starter. A change in working conditions must be bargained. You are seizing authority and making decisions you have no right to make. If you want to change our working conditions, then do that through the legal process of bargaining and not through fiat. Arguments must be based in logic and policy must be based in decency. Eliminating remote teaching and directing all secondary teachers back to their classroom to continue distance learning is based in neither logic nor decency. You want to order teachers back remotely to teach remotely from their classroom in 11 days. You will get the worst of both worlds should you do this. Teaching in the classroom necessitates masks, yes, plural, and this eliminates the ability of students to see a human being talking. They will still learn from a screen. So you've insisted we must gather, but toward what end? Why now? You've stated no reasons, logical or ethical, why this is so urgent. It must happen now. Per correspondence with the union, your filter installations are subpar and incomplete. We need more than hit and miss inspections to keep us safe. How are you going to protect my classroom neighbors and colleagues with elderly parents, with a new baby at home, with a multi-generational household? You're amplifying each of our risks by expanding our daily contacts to those in our buildings and on our campus. You're amplifying our risks, but for what reward? You are attempting to relocate us to a less safe environment for the purposes of what? Optics? Oh, to be you. Because thanks to you, being a teacher in this district is an exploitative existence. Shame on you.
Next, we have Jenna.
Hi, thank you guys for taking my comments tonight. First off, I just wanted to speak to what a caller said a few moments ago about sixth grade, bringing sixth grade back before seventh and eighth grade. Currently, we are operating on a distance learning bell schedule. And so in order to bring the sixth graders back, I would assume we would bring them back on a hybrid bell schedule. So I think that disconnect there, the sixth graders would be operating on a different bell schedule than the rest of the students on a middle school campus. So that just needs to be looked at. The second reason that I wanted to comment tonight was because I am a special education teacher in the district, and I do actually want what's best for kids. But I'm seeing a lot of misunderstandings out there in regards to the cohorts. I have 25 students on my current caseload at my middle school. And to assume that the best course of action is to bring them back in a cohort model is inadequate. One, I can't have all 25 in one cohort due to social distancing. Second, 5 of these students are in all gen ed classes and actually don't meet with me in a class period. We meet during an intervention time just once a week. And then 3, the 30 other or the 20 other students are mostly all in gen ed classes, except for one study skills class that meets twice a week currently. So if we were to come back in a cohort, we'd have to divide in half. We'd sit in a classroom, all zoomed into different classes, including myself, the teacher. This would be extremely distracting and not a good learning environment for students. My students will be best served when we all can come back into a hybrid model together and they're with their gen ed peers. Thank you.
Next, we have Jen.
Good evening. Just a couple questions. One, I had a friend ask to clarify the whether or not we are going back when we get the green light and it's a go versus the grade breaks. And just like I believe it was Michael, I would encourage when we get the green light, let's go. Because really, if with kids at Vista, at this point, if you say it's grade breaks, they're not going. Also, when does the MOU negotiation agreement start in all these timelines? What's the holdup to make that start? Because based on the comments tonight, I can see that being a giant barrier for getting our kids back in the classroom. I will have to say I have never before this meeting had the fear of my children going back in person to a classroom than I've had back when my daughter, Emma Wong, who everybody knows her back in preschool, the situation I encountered. And it's not because of COVID. It's because of the teacher comments tonight. I respect their fear. I respect their wanting to get a vaccine. But the vitriol that has come from them scares me to put my children back in a classroom with them. I'm almost speechless. I respect that they want safety. But if my husband can work in 3 hospitals and 5 clinics throughout Northern California with nothing more than a hospital mask, not in that 95, not 2 masks and gloves, without contracting COVID, I am confident, based on the AARP, CDC director, and Dr. Fauci, you can safely go back into the classroom. And I will support anything you need for that to happen. Thank you.
Next, we have Faith.
Hello, I have a few different comments on different things. So first of all, I'm a teacher at Cordova High School, and we're looking at hybrid options, and we're looking at masks and plexiglass. And if you've ever taught in a classroom, like being a teacher, you want to walk around and be with your students, and hiding behind a plexiglass screen with a computer is basically like being on Zoom. So that's not we need to have something different if we're going to actually be engaging with students. And I know I teach an engineering class that's hands-on, and so we've redesigned the curriculum. We've provided hands-on kits to students. And I think forward thinking, we don't know where this is going. There's different strains of the virus that could expand and it could get worse over time. And this may happen again. And so we really need to rethink education and how can we make this better in the future. So it's not just let's open right now. It's how can we make this good for students ongoing. And I've delivered kits to students, like individually to houses, and made really amazing connections that normally in school I don't make. And so I feel like there's been some very positive things with this situation. And also with some of the tools we've learned, we've been able to make very individual connections with students that maybe normally they'd be sitting there quiet and they're feeling more open to share because it's a virtual and texting environment. So the other thing is, vaccine fighting between teachers is super toxic. And so I've gotten a lot of texts that are positive, like get the vaccine and then you try to get it and it's a dead end. So it's sad and we need to have a better plan. That's all I got.
Martha, before you go on, President Short, we're getting close to 10:30. You might need to make a motion to extend the meeting.
Mr. President, I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it, but we need to identify the time that we're extending it to.
I will make the motion to extend past 10:30 to, let's say, 11:30.
All right, I'll second.
Okay, I got a first, second. Superintendent, roll call.
Yes, Mr. Short,
Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Hoover,
Aye.
Mr. Hui,
Aye.
Mr. Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Vaughn.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Christopher.
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak in tonight. I'll be brief in the reference of time here. So listening to the teachers speak tonight, one thing I feel we're missing is that school is primarily about the student, yet we're prioritizing teachers, administrators, unions, just about everything else first. I admire Faith's, the engineering instructor here, being able to make that connection. That's an outlier, and it's not happening for the rest of the school. It's not for the rest of the kids. And this whole pajama day, every day issue that is going on with all the students is not okay. And so, I would be fine with distance learning if it was working for everyone else. It's not. We need to change it. We need to figure out a better way to do it. The American dream is about building a better life for yourself, your kids, and education is fundamental to making that happen. And if we're not making that happen, why are we even here? So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Next, we have Kelsey.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. So I want to follow up with what Dan McCrossan was speaking to. I'm also a music teacher. I teach in the middle school and the high school level, so at two different school sites. So coming back with sixth grade, I just want you guys to visualize a little bit of what that would look like. I have 6th and 7th in my 6th grade classes. So that's one thing to kind of think about. The other thing is right now, according to county public health, you can't sing or play wind instruments inside a classroom, which means that if my kids come back and it's about a third in each group, that would come back, 2/3 are coming back, it seems like, and 1/3 is still opting for distance learning. These are all ballparks from what I've looked from my own classes. So that means about 15 kids will be in person. I'll have to have them be playing their instruments outside. And then I will have about 30 inside being streamed. So if anybody wants to figure out how that's going to look, I would love it. Because right now, at least my kids can play together in their school at home. I'm nervous about coming back and how I'm going to deal with weather and playing instruments outside, because that's what that's my job. I have a credential to teach music. I'm not credentialed in anything else but that. So thanks for letting me speak.
Next, we have Tyler.
Good evening again, board. I guess I'm just still unclear on the coming back. That the presentation from Dr. Ogden was just a little uncertain as why we're bringing all the teachers back on the 22nd. We have technology that's been installed, and EHS has done an outstanding job and bought all this technology and went around and installed in the classrooms. So if we have it installed in the classrooms and teachers are working from home with their reliable internet, like, why are we coming back? It's really unclear. This just all of a sudden kind of came up in the last day, and it sounds like bargaining kind of broke down. And then we're just coming back on the 22nd, and I'm not just seeing the rationale for it. I haven't heard anything from the board. I know you guys have really been pushing to bring sixth graders back, and there's some logistical issues with that that have been outlined here. But as far as having all teachers come back, and this has gone on in districts all around the country, is these teachers sitting in an empty classroom going, I'm not really sure why I'm here, and exposing myself. And the exposing myself is brought up to my second point here, which is the front line. In the fall semester, teachers used a different source for contact tracing. So for the days that we did come on campus, we logged in and made sure we had our symptoms, and then we had to identify who we interacted with throughout the day. And the new frontline system that I know students use, because they're going to one location at the elementary level with their teacher. But at the secondary site, like, we go to the office, and I say I'm good, and then we have a positive test case in our office. And then how are we doing any contact tracing with that? It sounds like Sacramento County is overwhelmed with their contact tracing, and so it falls on our nurses, but the nurses don't know who interacted with, and there's medical confidentiality. So it really seemed like the system that we had in the fall was much better for contact tracing. So I'd ask that we go back to that and keep track of who we're around if we are on campus during that time.
Mr. Short, that was the last hand.
Okay, great. Thank you for all the comments and people participating. I know we're running a little late, but this is a discussion action item. We're going to bring this back to the final board comments.
Mr. President?
And yes.
Yeah, I have a couple of additional questions and thoughts that came to mind based on hearing the public comment. I guess the first one is for the superintendent. Is it fair to say that the 6th grade waiver that we asked staff to investigate and report back tonight would basically produce the same or similar result of timing wise as the new CDPH waiver that was announced last night would take? And I guess to phrase it a different way, if we went with just the CDPH waiver for all of secondary, would that basically get the 6th grade class back in school roughly the same amount of time if we had done just the 6th grade waiver?
From my understanding of the timelines are probably very close to the same. The piece that I am not clear on yet is what the school safety requirement will be to submit to CDPH for our middle schools and high schools to return before we enter into the red tier, other than the COVID safety plan. The piece that was, that is unsure with 6th grade coming back with the way that the guidance is currently written, again, until we get that approval from CDPH, we wouldn't know where that stands. So I would say we pause on just the 6th grade alone and focus on middle schools coming back. I think we heard comment tonight that it, rather than piecemealing it, since there is a way to do that now with the CDPH petition process that came out last night and we fit that criteria, but I would recommend we pursue that.
Thank you. Yeah, I obviously I raised the 6th grade issue at the last board meeting before these new CDPH guidance came out last night. And, I think I agree with folks. I mean, if we can get all of our secondary back, that's what our goal should be. And, obviously sixth grade was, that's how fast things change. That sixth grade was an option, but now it looks like we have an option for all of our secondary. So for purposes of consistency, I would personally think I would prefer the staff to spend their time and energy in getting all the kids back. If it's going to produce roughly sixth grade returning at give or take the same time as the other process. So another question that I have is, can we, I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but can we explore a scenario where teachers can teach from their home and live stream to the classroom with a proctor? I know that conversation has come up in the past. I thought we were entertaining that concept. I mean, if the concerns of the teachers are exposure, wouldn't we be completely addressing all of their concerns if we allow them to teach from their home, at least the ones that want to? I'm sure there are plenty of teachers who would be thrilled to come and teach to a class and do the reverse, to teach the class and live stream to those students that want to do distance learning. But I mean, obviously, I suspect the problem there is getting proctors, but I think that's something we could figure out if that provides the level of comfort to the handful of teachers that are concerned, at least until we can get the vaccine widely distributed to our teachers. It is, well, I guess, what's the status of that concept?
I'm going to ask Mr. Ogden if he can chime in. I know we've looked at a lot of different options. Mr. Ogden?
Thank you. That's a really good question. We have a process we've been going through, and actually we started this process with elementary teachers, where if someone has a medical condition where they have a doctor's note that says that it's not safe for them to be back, we go through it's called the interactive process. It's non-precedent setting. We do it on a case-by-case basis. We did it in elementary when we brought elementary teachers back, and we've already gone through that process with secondary staff, and we've identified about 30 staff members at this point who we will be using that proctor model on at this time.
I guess my question is, I mean, the vaccines are coming out. We know that. Is it? I'm just I guess talking to myself here, but is it worth it to consider expanding that model to those teachers who are very concerned and for legitimate reasons? I don't deny their fear and their concern. I mean, why can't we expand that model to allow those teachers, until they are able to get vaccinated, to also participate in that? I mean, with the technology, I mean, it's a little different than elementary from the way I'm looking at it. And the reason why I say that is because we didn't make the major investment into these camera systems for elementary. We did for all of secondary. Mm-hmm. So it seems like a little bit of an apples versus oranges scenario here to compare it to elementary. I don't know. I mean, I certainly want to make the teachers feel comfortable. I mean, they are a critical element to our public education system. We need them to be able to teach. And if that's what it will take, maybe we should consider that.
Yeah, we've met with several hundred teachers since the pandemic started, and many teachers have sat down with, well, not in person, but on in a Zoom meeting with our staff. And a lot of times when they hear what we're doing as far as providing PPE, the social distancing, the hand washing stations, how we are providing plexiglass, we've got a variety of things in place that after we have a conversation with them, they say, okay, if that's what's in place, I feel comfortable. And then we've had some who said, well, I actually have a doctor's note, and I've got this situation, and we've engaged where that individual was. And so I think we have been doing that process successfully with both elementary and secondary. And I think, we've been working on that long enough now that, if we did have someone who has a a sincere concern, we work to help them find a place where they feel safe working.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. And then this is just an observation. I know that there's been folks, whether it's on tonight or I've heard it through emails and other places, of is it worth it to return to school if there's only 10 students in the classroom or 5 to 6 students in the classroom? And my feeling to that question is this: I have lost track of how many emails I've received from parents talking about their children being suicidal. And if returning to the classroom or giving that option, potentially saves one life, and yes, the answer is yes, it is worth it to return to the classroom if there's only 5 or 6 students in the classroom. And no one's going to change my mind on that. So, so those are my thoughts. Obviously, I think that I don't know what we do with the motion. The motion seems to be outdated based on the new information we got from CDPH from last night. So, but let me pause there and let my colleagues speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Mr. President.
Mr. Clark.
Well, we're looking at 11 days versus 16 days, and I want to actually just thank Mr. Reed for his insight and thinking outside the box and understanding what we're looking at as far as our 6th graders coming back. I was just thinking about it, and it's a what if, and it's a scary what if for me, and I don't think it'll happen because the numbers are trending down. But if we circumvent the guidance and go back to the purple tier, God forbid, what's the liability for the district if things go sideways? I mean, I always think about that in classes are quarantined. Have we ever thought about that? Thought about a game plan, how that's going to work? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. We work very closely with our liability JPA, and their main guidance to us is as long as you're following your county public health and CDPH's guidance, they've given you the blessing on reopening, then that they will be by our side.
Okay. 11 days versus 16 days. I'm going to keep saying that as I'm leading into what else I'm going to say. Teachers hopefully will get their shots on the 20th. We don't know. We're kind of waiting. But instead, we're asking them to come into the classroom, even if they're on DL. And I'm still trying to figure out the logistics of our teachers and how that's going to work. Safety protocol. Teachers that need to leave their room when they're being cleaned, if they're going to be cleaned. How do they congregate safely? Where do they go for lunch? I mean, those simple things. How do they? And I know there was mention about, using the restroom and I mean, how does all that happen? Something as minute as making copies. I mean, that may be time consuming itself. So I'm just wondering how we're gonna have our teachers on campus when, right now everything is awry and they're doing distance learning, but they're in person. So I'm trying to figure that out. Mr. Reed made the comment about the proctor. Something worth to look. I mean, something to look into. I think it's worth it, actually. So I'm just, at least we're getting shots in arms. I don't know when. I'm hoping it's on the 20th. I hope it's on the 27th. I hope it leads into March. But, we're looking at maybe 5 instructional days before we hit the 1st of March, to where we can get all these kids in. And I know that if they have a targeted date, I know these kids are going to say, yes, finally. And I'm hoping that we keep our word and make sure that our kids are back in class. And, you know, I want to make sure that they're back in school. I want to make sure that they're playing their athletics. I want to make sure that they're in band together. I want to make sure that our performing arts are doing what they do. So I just want folks to understand that we're looking at a total of 5 days. But we will get these kids back in school. And then we need, as a board and as a district, look forward to August and in the fall of getting our kids back full time. Obviously, there'll be some safety protocols and everything in place, but you know, we need to get our kids back in school. But I think that, you know, we're looking at a 5-day differential of getting them back in on the first. You know, during their trimester, and then Mills and Mitchell, you know, during their quarter. And that'll be my comments for that. So however you guys want to work this motion, I'm in.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Mr. President. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Or Tim?
Sure.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, just a few things. You know, I do want to speak to Tyler Johnstone's question of why the 22nd. It's a fair question. I would say my own thoughts on that was, you know, I think it's important teachers are in the classroom that week before students come in, so they are comfortable. They're not kind of learning on the fly as students are in the classroom. I understand that. You know, for if that is finals week for some teachers, that might not be a great option. I'm willing to push that tape back, but I do think it's important that teachers have a chance to be in their classroom before the students get there, before the day the students are there. So hopefully, Tyler, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about that if you want to reach out to me. I think it's important to say this: what we're talking about, bringing all of secondary back into the hybrid model, is not a perfect option, but it's a better option than what has been happening. And it's a step in the right direction. And I want to make it really clear that for me, yeah, I absolutely agree with Mr. Clark that, you know, in August, hopefully we have an option that's even better than what we're going to enter into in hybrid. And frankly, if we have an opportunity later in this year to enter into something more of a 5-day model safely, then we ought to be doing that. So this, to me, is a step toward getting there, and it's really important that we take it. Ms. Reed, I guess I would say, in terms of a proctor or not, I really do think that something different happens for students when their teachers are in a classroom, even when it's not in an ideal situation. So I'm not real comfortable working toward that quite yet. I think if we are saying that we have our safety plan in place and it's safe, if we're saying it's safe for teachers to be back in the classroom, then I think that's what we should expect happens outside of the circumstances that Mr. Ogden outlined. So that's where I'd be. I want to push to get secondary back to follow the latest guidelines. And I think there's some wiggle room on things like, you know, the 22nd, to Mr. Johnstone's point. So I think that's it for me, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover.
Thank you, Mr. Short. So yeah, definitely a few thoughts here. You know, one of the commenters tonight asked a question. Someone who was not supportive of our plan to return, but you know, they asked, why are we doing this? Why are we pushing for in-person learning? And I just, I guess as a parent, it's very frustrating to continue to hear that question asked in a negative way, as if it is somehow not a worthy goal, or if there are somehow not benefits to in-person learning versus distance learning. Why are we pushing for an in-person learning? I can't even, it's hard to count all the reasons, to be honest with you. Number one, and this has been an issue for a long time, is the mental health of our kids. And we've known this, and everyone has acknowledged that this is a constant struggle with distance learning, that our kids are fighting with thoughts of suicide, fighting with social isolation, just being constantly pulled down by these things, as not only can they not be in school, but they can't, in many cases, compete in the sports that they love, or see the friends that they have, or get just quality in-person interaction with other people. We're doing this because the academic outcomes of our students matter. The number of students in our district getting D's and F's has tripled in the last year. It's tripled. We're doing this because equity matters, and we are seeing achievement gaps between Folsom and Rancho Cordova grow every single day that we are not in person. They were already there. They're growing larger because we're not in person. We are doing this because the CDC, our leading health experts that we rely on to lead us, and I agree with the superintendent, we do need to follow the health guidelines. That's exactly what we need to do. The CDC is telling us schools are safer than the community at large, that there is zero evidence of student to staff transmission, and that vaccines should not be a prerequisite for reopening classrooms, although they do need to be a priority. We're doing this because we have shown in our own district that we can do it safely. We've had elementary schools open for months. Our numbers are dropping dramatically, and we have put the necessary protocols in place to make it work. That's why we're doing this. Schools across the country and the state are currently open safely. Schools in our own backyard are open safely. This idea that schools are not safe is patently false, and it is long past time for FCUSD to reopen its classrooms. So just want to get that out of the way. That is why we're doing this. And that is why we have a critical responsibility to keep pushing to get our kids back into the classroom, because it's what's best for them. That is why we need to do it. Now to my comments on this motion. As Mr. Reed pointed out, when we brought up bringing sixth graders back, the goal was laudable. It was to get as many kids back in in-person instruction as we could, as allowed within the guidelines. However, when that was proposed, it was before the CDPH announced this new waiver process. So I actually agree, with Mr. Reed and Mr. Clark, or, I think a number of board members mentioned it tonight. I think it makes more sense to bring all of our kids back at the same time. And now that option looks like it's available, I think we need to focus on that. I think the superintendent stated that as well, and I think that's the best course of action at this point. To the point about proctors, I don't fully agree with my colleague, Mr. Reed, about expanding that model. I think what we did for elementary schools worked. I think we need to trust our staff on their current approach, and just give them the opportunity to work with each teacher on, the necessary things that they need. I would not be supportive of expanding that process, but I do encourage our staff to continue to work with teachers that need accommodations. And then, I understand the superintendent's point about the grading periods. I get it. Part of me, though, and I just want to float this because I think someone in public comment made the point that, we need to make sure that our kids we get as many kids back as soon as possible, and not necessarily just base everything on the grading periods. We may want to explore bringing middle schoolers back if their campuses are going to be ready to go. I think that could be something that we should look into. Let's get our Folsom and Rancho schools back at the same time. Again, I'm going to obviously defer to my colleagues in terms of consensus on this, but I think it's something that we should at least consider over the next week as we wait for a response from CDPH. And then finally, I would just also agree with Mr. Huey that a hybrid model is just the first step. We cannot stop with the hybrid model, but it is a critical first step in restoring the education that our students need the most. So in terms of the motion, I don't know if we table it. I don't know if we need a motion. I mean, the superintendent has clearly already applied for this waiver process, so I'm not sure that anything needs to be done on our part to keep that process going. But I agree that I think we need to focus now and ask our staff to focus on getting all of our kids back rather than just the sixth graders at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. I want to thank all the board for all their comments and all the public. A lot tonight. I know it's getting late, so I'm going to try to keep this short. What I heard tonight is, yes, we have ever-changing guidelines that change overnight, and I agree with my board members here that, and the superintendent, that we should probably just focus on getting all the kids back. There's a lot of array of reasons why we should get the kids back. It's social, emotional. You know, we know it's all bad. It's just not. It's not working. We need to get the kids back. But with that said, we also need to get it back when it's safe. We need to also partner and make sure all our stakeholders are involved in that decision. That includes our teachers. I heard tonight that, you know, they're concerned about air quality, which we all know, but it's not required. But we are making sure that happens, and we got to roll it out. There's logistics and things to roll out. That's why we came up with the March 1st and March 15th dates. So there's logistics. I heard that teachers need childcare, and there's some logistics on that. And they're really concerned about safety. We should listen and partner with them because our kids are the most important, but also our teachers are in the classroom with our with kids, which are the ones that are going to be teaching the kids, and they're the ones building the rapport, and they're ones that the interaction does happen. And so it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. They're both go hand in hand. So that's the nucleus, if you will. So we need to work together and making sure, and I know our administration staff and negotiations and MOUs are going to be important. And we should strive all together as a team, unify together and make sure we go back in the safest model. And number one is safety. So I know that's a debatable thing. It's been politicized, pandemic, but we need to focus on our circle of influence, and that's really what we can do to get their kids back to school and work with everybody involved. So I think that's important that we still think partnerships and not forget our teachers, because they're a critical part. They're the ones that teach our kids. So I want to just say that and make sure everybody understands that we're all in this together. The virus is a dangerous virus. It is dangerous. It's not what a lot of people, if you haven't lived it, you can't comment on it. It's a scary virus. Yes, there's new viruses coming. There's that, and it's not going to go away. So, but the data shows that schools are not super spreaders, as Mr. Hoover said. We have safe data showing what we are doing. Right now, it's getting better. We are a success story in the region. Other school districts are looking at us, and I'm really happy about that. But it came with a big price. A lot of pain. We're doing it right. We need to do it slowly, incrementally. And I think this next step would be to do what I hear what the board is and what the superintendent recommends. Let's take advantage of the new waiver, work together towards our safety plans and our MOUs, and let's try to get this done in the most expeditiously possible. As far as the proctor, Mr. Reed, it sounds like a really good idea, but from a teacher's perspective and student, that learning happens with the teacher in the classroom. It's that rapport with that the teacher to be able to do classroom management, to be able to work with the kids. But a proctor, I'm not quite sure that we want to go there yet either. So I know Mr. Hui mentioned that too. So I think once you've been a teacher, you know about that rapport and that dialogue that goes with that interaction. It's a good idea if we're in a pinch with a teacher that we have no resource, but I think right now we need to focus on getting our teachers back in the classroom, getting our kids back in the classroom where that interaction happens, which the most effective learning happens, and the classroom management happens, and all the good things that we've been talking about to really protect our kids from all the social emotional fallout, from all the bad grades that we're getting out here we all know distance learning is not a long-term solution. And we need to come through this recovery and incremental. Let's get the trust back, build a bridge of trust with all our staff. Let's make it happen. So I think I hear the board making that. I would like to, ask the board to give a motion here. I think one of you, Mr. Reed, I know maybe on the part on the K, just the 6 itself, K through 6, I think the intent of the guidelines was really, there's a lot of school districts that are K through 6, we're K through 5. And that 6 was really intended for self-contained classrooms where the teachers are in there and you have, just dedicated students in there. I hear tonight a lot of the teachers like music. I heard even Spanish. How do you do Spanish? Because you have a lot of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in there. A few students coming in there. There are a lot of logistics issues. So I think the consensus is what I'm hearing, but I would like to hear out of the board provide a clear direction for staff tonight, and I want to hear that too. So thank you much for the deliberation, and let me hear the board give a motion. That would be clear.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have a draft motion for folks to entertain. And we can.
Mr. Reed, before you go, shall we let Ms. Gallant comment too?
My apologies. Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. I don't have any comments, but yes, obviously returning as soon as possible is important, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bring it back to the board.
I'll defer to my colleagues on the whole Proctor idea. As you know, I'm always trying to troubleshoot problems and trying to find the compromise, but I don't disagree with you. So I'll let that idea go. But this is the motion that I will put. Actually, let me just read it, and we can tweak it if need be, and then informally make the motion if there's a second. But I move that the board support the staff proceeding with the new CDPH waiver with the goal of opening secondary schools on March 1st or at the earliest date possible based on facility readiness, waiver approval, or color tier classification.
Mr. Reed? Yeah. Or I guess, sorry, Mr. President?
Yeah, Mr. Hoy, do you want to add to that?
I guess I'm wondering if I can. I would like to ask for some language in here about bringing special education back. I don't know if it's possible within this motion to say as early as, I don't see why it has to be March 1st or March 15th, or as early as possible. So is that something we can add to the motion? Yeah, and when I say bringing special education back, I mean in full.
Well, for basically on the Robert rules, technically, if somebody makes a motion on a motion, you would have to ask for an amendment, and then we'd have to kind of go around and vote on it.
Okay.
Under this situation, the dialogue needs to kind of happen before we get a motion, I think. Right now,
I just read the motion for the purposes of dialogue, not okay. Formal motion.
So you're okay. So we're still deliberating on that part. So right. If we're not going out of Robert rules, but okay. I mean, you could probably amend that to include special education. We definitely.
Is there? Sorry, Board President. Yeah. Is there? I mean, I guess is there any reason we couldn't say? Bringing back trimester schools on March 1st, semester schools on March 15th, and special education, I mean, as soon as possible, February 17th. Is there a reason we wouldn't have that language?
That's a good proposal because of the terms. We want to make sure we don't disrupt the students. Yeah, that's why March 1st and March 15th were critical dates.
Correct. And I guess it should be noted, any special ed student or family of a student would have the option of waiting until March 1st if they didn't want to come back earlier, or till the 15th. Okay. But I would like to at least give the option to come back prior to that.
Okay. What's on the table? Any other board deliberation on that?
Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. Clark, go ahead.
To Mr. Huey's thing about special ed, I'm just wondering how that would affect the master schedule at all. It may or may not. I mean, something to think about. And then what are we doing with our teachers? I mean, if we're bringing them back in on the 22nd and we're not sure if those shots are going to be available, everything else sounds good. First, 15th, that sounds golden. I mean, I'll support that, but I'm just concerned about our teachers not getting their shots. You know, Mr. Reed said that our teachers are critical. We need to show them that they're more than critical. They're essential to us, and we do need them. So I'm just wondering, can we, have that professional development and then have a set date to bring them back? Or do we just say you're coming back on the 22nd? That's it. That's all. Fini. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just feel some kind of way about that without the guarantee that those shots will be available. And I think that's, for me, I just want them to get the shot. The second shot is coming. I just want them to feel comfortable and let them know that we actually care about them. And like I said, they're critical. They're essential. We need to get a shot in the arm, just one shot, and then they can come back and get the second one. But that's just my 2 cents. Carry on with the motion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask the superintendent, do we need a timeline tonight, or can we decide on the timeline at our next, board meeting on the 8th?
Next week.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do this. Obviously, we'll know more in a week. I do think we should give the direction, like, let's continue pursuing this waiver. But I don't know how prescriptive we should get on the timeline yet. I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm feeling, but I wanted to get the superintendent's take on that.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we keep it broader right now and we follow the process that we have all agreed to pursue. And by next week, I expect I'll have an update.
I like that idea.
And then for special ed, we'll want to, I don't know if that needs to be part of tonight's motion. I think we can update next week at the board meeting, but I think we have to define self-contained classes versus those that mainstream with, the gen ed classes. I want to make sure we're clear on that before we vote on a motion where I don't know all the impacts of that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too much in the detail of that, bringing it into tonight's motion.
Okay. The only thing I would ask, and Superintendent, I don't know if this is something you'd be willing to do, but if I don't have a problem if staff comes back with a recommended timeline, but maybe if our agenda item included a few different options from what was discussed tonight, because, obviously special education is one Mr. Huey brought up. I would also love to at least discuss the idea of bringing middle schools back at the same time, or really as many kids as we can back earlier, even if it's not on the grading period. So I totally understand if staff's going to have their recommendation, but I just want to make sure the agenda item is worded in a way that we have flexibility on what we move forward with.
Okay.
I have, we may decide not to do a motion at all tonight, but based on everything that my colleagues have been saying, I have at least a revised potential motion. And again, I'm not making the motion. I just want to read it. But it would read, I move that the board support the staff proceeding with the new CDPH waiver with the goal of opening secondary schools and special education programming at the earliest possible date based on facility readiness, waiver approval, or color tier classification.
Can we add, like we were talking about earlier, what Mr. Clark was talking about? We want to make sure our most essential stakeholders, our teachers, be part of that. if we can incorporate some of that, because you got everybody in it except our teachers.
What are you suggesting?
Or maybe, Mr. President, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Clark.
Maybe we table this until next Thursday. That way we know if the teachers are eligible for their shots on the 20th instead of waiting, and playing this waiting game. And then that way we can get our motion together. Staff can come up with the recommendations. Just, things may change.
Yeah.
We'll get an update status on, the waiver. I mean, is that any way possible?
Yeah, I think that's what Mr. Hoover was saying.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a comment that, all of our elementaries are operating with hybrid in person, and they've been doing so safely. And as much as we're advocating, and I'm advocating for vaccines and that we be at the front of the line for phase 1B, it, as we heard from Dr. Casirier, it's not a prerequisite, but we all want to have it, absolutely. But I don't want that to hold us back either. I think we will continue to make accommodations where we need to with staff, and I can't say it enough that we've had our elementary folks back since November, and they've been doing it safely. And we just, we want to keep that in mind too. They're part of our district as well.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Mr. Clark's suggestion that we table a motion because I think that the superintendent has already started the waiver process. So, we don't necessarily need to give permission for that at this point. But I do want to be careful that we're not making vaccines a prerequisite. I mean, not only is that not recommended necessarily, but Dr. Casirier was pretty clear that not just because some teachers get the vaccine that day, that not all of them may. So, I think we need to continue to advocate for that process to improve on a separate track as we're figuring out the timeline on this. So that's just where I'm at. But I'm fine if we table the motion, or I'd support David's motion as well. But I think either option.
What I'm hearing is, I think I'm getting that we table this, and next week staff will bring back, we'll know more and we can get a better handle on the new waiver process and all the logistics, and it buys time too. We'll know more next week. So what I'm hearing is, can I get a motion at least to say to table this and come back next week with staff's recommendations on the new waiver process? I mean, that's about it.
I'll move it.
Okay, you move it. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Got it for a second. Sarah, can you make, Ms. Superintendent, can you do the roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Reed?
No.
Mr. Short?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Hoover? Oops, you're muted.
Sorry. Aye.
Mr. Hui?
Aye.
Ms. Gallant?
Aye.
Motion carried. Oh, I got everyone. Motion carries 4-1.
So you got a lot of work for next week. So we'll look forward to the discussion next week. So I appreciate the board's deliberation, and thank you very much. And thank you for the public and everybody participating in this discussion. With that said, where are we at on our next one? To be just a discussion item. Item 7, update on the 2021-22 registration timeline, Superintendent.
Yes, again, this is a follow-up from last board meeting. Board member Hui, I believe, asked if we could look at extending the timeline for the registration process, especially for the elementary maybe, and also middle and high school. So Mr. Wilson, do you want to share our latest update on that, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Clegan. As stated in the rationale, basically staff took a look at all the registration timelines in conjunction with our education code and the timelines in terms of human resources department, and making sure that whatever movement we made in those timelines still allowed us to do the business that we needed to do in terms of staffing our schools based off of the numbers of students registering for those classes. And with that, we are comfortable in bumping that timeline a little bit. We are able to extend it, that registration timeline until February 26th, which I believe buys another week in that timeline. I think conversations that occur tonight and will occur back on the 18th will assist parents in making the decision as to how they want to register their children. So we're hoping that this revised timeline is sufficient for the board's direction.
Okay. Board question?
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no questions, but I just want to thank the staff for pulling that together.
So yeah, we got a week of like be for our advantage. So thank you for that, Mr. Hoover or Mr. Reed.
Nope, no comment. Good job.
Excellent. Okay. Any public comment?
No, Mr. Short.
Okay, bring it back. It's only a discussion item. So that's it for discussion. Any final board comments? I think we already made the comments and consolidated them.
Mr. President.
At that point, yes, go ahead.
If you don't do it, I'll move to adjourn.
Okay.
It's up to you to close it down. I'm just making that motion so we can say goodnight.
Motion got a second? We got a second. It looks like everybody's tired.
Yeah.
It's time to go to bed. Thank you, everyone, for such a late meeting. Thank you for the deliberation. And next week, we'll have some more information and keep moving towards success getting our kids back. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
All right.